Chapter 23:12. A scarlet light flew out and enveloped Nanjin Shu. A terrifying pressure descended upon him, encircling his entire body and forming a barrier. Clang! A wave of energy repelled Chu Liuyue's Star Darkness sword. Chu Liuyue was shocked and quickly retreated. However, the Star Darkness sword couldn't completely avoid the attack. The sword trembled, almost numbing Chu Liuyue's hand. Did the first divine emissary attack? Chu Liuyue frowned. He suppressed the surging aura in his chest and looked at Nanjin Shu. Nanjin Shu was overjoyed. First divine emissary. The seal flew out of his hand and floated in the air. An endless amount of pressure and power spread out from it. Chu Liuyue narrowed his eyes. The seal contained the first divine emissary's aura. No wonder Nanjin Shu was so confident. First divine emissary. Did you see that? This Shangguan Yu is extremely bold. Not only did she barge into the illusionary god's sea, but she also turned this place upside down. She even forced me to tell her the whereabouts of the third zither score. Nanjin Shu was excited. He felt like he had found a savior and hurriedly told him everything that Chu Liuyue had done. She's so bold and arrogant. She doesn't care about you at all. She doesn't respect the illusionary god palace at all. First divine emissary. You must punish her severely as a warning to others. Nanjin Shu couldn't be blamed for being so angry. After all, a sword was pressed against his neck just a moment ago. His life was hanging by a thread. Now that he finally had a chance to counterattack, he naturally wouldn't let it go. He wanted nothing more than to ask the first divine emissary to kill Chu Liuyue personally. However, in the next moment, a cold and deep voice rang out from the talisman, causing Nanjin Shu to be stunned. Nanjin Shu, what did you say to her just now? Every word was cold and deep, like an interrogation. His tone was filled with undisguised anger. Nanjin Shu was stunned. What did he say just now? No, he told Chu Liuyue about the third score. His entire body was covered in cold sweat. First messenger, I didn't do it on purpose. Shangguan Yu, has been forcing me. This matter was extremely confidential, which was why the first divine emissary was willing to meet him and gave him the qualifications to cultivate in the illusionary god sea. If it was any other day, Nanjin Shu wouldn't have mentioned it so casually. But just now, Chu Liuyue's sword was on his neck. He was angry and scared. In a moment of impulse, he actually blurted it out. He didn't expect the first oracle to know about it. Chu Liuyue narrowed his eyes when he heard the voice. This voice was very unfamiliar, but the tone, it was strangely familiar. He felt like he had heard it somewhere before. Nanjin Shu was afraid that he would be punished. He quickly shifted the blame to Chu Liuyue. First divine emissary, if she hadn't forced me, I wouldn't have said these things. Furthermore, the first two pieces of music are indeed with her. She had broken so many taboos. Just this alone should be enough to punish her, right? However, the first divine emissary didn't seem to listen to Nanjin Shu. Both of you, leave the illusionary god sea immediately. From now on, you are not allowed to come back. Nanjin Shu was stunned. First divine emissary, what do you mean? He didn't mind. He had made a mistake and should be punished. But what about Chu Liuyue? First divine emissary, before he could finish his sentence, the first divine emissary's voice came from the talisman again. Nanjin Shu, do you have any objections? His voice was very soft, but it made Nanjin Shu shiver. He hurriedly said, I wouldn't dare. No matter how unhappy he was with this result, he knew that he couldn't show it. Wasn't going against the first divine emissary suicidal. No matter how much Nanjin Shu hated Chu Liuyue and how much he wanted her to die here, he still had a brain. The first divine emissary clearly didn't intend to kill her. Other than chasing her out of the illusionary god sea, there wasn't any other punishment. Perhaps it was because he was afraid of the two scores? After all, the talisman had already recognized her as its master. It wasn't feasible to take it by force. Nanjin Shu thought about it and felt that this was the only answer. He suppressed the surging emotions in his heart and cupped his fists. Jinshu will leave now. After that, He gave Chu Lue a deep look before heading up to the sea. However, the talisman didn't leave with him. It just hung there quietly. It was only a few steps away from Chu Lue. Chu Lue stared at the talisman and suddenly asked, "First divine emissary, have we met before?" The talisman didn't answer. Several rays of red light swirled around, stirring up waves. Swoosh! The scattered stones finally returned to Chu Lue. Chu Lue had a thought and put them all back into her universe ring. Then, the talisman quietly dissipated. It transformed into a crimson light that covered everything below. Chu Lue's eyes narrowed. This red light was exactly the same as the Red Moon Desert. She clenched her fists and finally turned to leave. Splash! The sound of water splashing attracted the attention of the people on the Silver Bridge. Countless pairs of eyes immediately gathered in that direction. They saw a figure rushing out of the water and heading in their direction. Nanjing Shu? Why is he the one coming out? Isn't he supposed to cultivate in the illusionary god sea? It hasn't even been a day. Is it over? His expression doesn't look right. After Nanjing Shu came out, he was shocked to see so many people gathered on the Silver Bridge. Those gazes made him extremely embarrassed. However, he couldn't go back now. He could only brace himself and go forward. Soon, he arrived on the Silver Bridge as well. The moment his feet touched the ground, he didn't stop and immediately headed toward the heavenly gate above him. There was no expression on his face. He exuded a dangerous and cold aura that kept people at arm's length. Anyone with eyes could see that he was in an extremely bad mood at this moment. The people around him quieted down. However, not everyone was wary of him. For example, Mu Hongyu. She quickly arrived in front of Nanjing Shu and stopped him. "Nanjing Shu, where's Lu Yu?" Nanjing Shu knew who she was talking about. His expression immediately turned ugly. "What does it have to do with me? If you want to know, why don't you go and see for yourself?" He hated Chu Lue to the core. Even hearing her name made him grit his teeth. Mu Hongyu raised her chin. "How troublesome. You're all in the illusionary god seat anyway. What's wrong with me asking? Everything had been fine earlier." However, for some reason, she suddenly couldn't see what was going on below. She was worried. Of course, she had to ask Nanjing Shu about it. Suddenly, she narrowed her eyes and asked curiously, why is there a sword wound on your neck?" Chapter 23:13. It would have been better if Nanjing Shu hadn't mentioned it. In fact, it was only a very shallow wound. The skin was slightly broken and a faint trace of blood seeped out. It would recover in 2 or 3 days. However, it constantly reminded Nanjing Shu of the humiliation he had suffered in front of Chu Lue. He raised his hand to touch his neck and snorted coldly. "If you don't want any trouble, you'd better leave now. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that there won't be more injuries on your body." He was clearly threatening Nanjing Shu. He couldn't defeat Chu Lue, but it wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with Mu Hongyu, who was only a high god. However, Mu Hongyu didn't care at all. Mu Hongyu blinked when she saw the man's angry expression. "Patriarch Nan, why are you so angry? Could it be that Lu Yu is the one who gave you this injury?" "You." Nanjing Shu was even more furious. He waved his hand and formed a sharp blade with his divine power. It went straight for Mu Hongyu. The two of them were only a step away from each other. Even an honorable god of the same level might not be able to dodge his sudden attack in time, let alone a high god. Swish! The sharp blade pierced through Mu Hongyu's chest. The crowd exclaimed. However, the next moment they saw that Mu Hongyu had disappeared. That was clearly just her afterimage. Nanjing Shu's heart had just been filled with joy when he saw this scene and was taken aback. Then, a hand gently patted his shoulder from behind. "Patriarch Nan, you're not strong enough." Nanjing Shu's hair stood on end. He immediately turned around. Mu Hongyu was standing behind him with a smile. "How did you?" Before he could ask, Mu Hongyu threw a punch. It landed on Nanjing Shu's face. Bang! With a dull thud, Nanjing Shu felt dizzy and stumbled a few steps back, almost falling to the ground. When Mu Hongyu threw this punch, It affected the power of the surrounding space and created a great pressure on Nanjing. That was why he was able to catch Nanjing off guard so easily. Nanjing felt a dull pain all over his face. Something was flowing out from his nose and the corner of his mouth. He wiped it off and looked down. The blood was thick and red. His hands began to tremble slightly. The surrounding onlookers revealed strange expressions when they saw this. What was going on? Wasn't Mu Hongyu a high deity? After exchanging blows with Nanjing, not only was he not injured, but he even managed to beat Nanjing to such a state. Mu Hongyu clicked her tongue and shook her head. Nan family head, you don't seem to be in a good condition. Why do you have to force yourself? I'm just asking you a question. Can't you just answer me honestly? Now, you've added new wounds to your old wounds. Look, what do you want? Nanjing was about to explode from anger. Mu Hongyu touched her ear. Hey, I'm listening. You. At this moment, another figure dashed out of the illusionary god ocean. Shengwan Yu is out. Someone in the crowd exclaimed. Mu Hongyu quickly turned around. When she saw that it was Chu Luiyue, she heaved a sigh of relief and waved happily. Chu Luiyue was also very fast. He arrived at the Silver Bridge in the blink of an eye. Mu Hongyu hurried forward and looked Chu Luiyue up and down. Luyu, are you all right? Just now, a mysterious and powerful force had suddenly appeared and blocked her perception, causing her to be quite worried. When she saw that Nanjing had returned first and was injured, she was even more worried about what had happened below. Chu Luiyue smiled. I'm fine. Mu Hongyu heaved a sigh of relief after confirming that she was really not injured. That's good, that's good. Chu Luiyue looked up and saw Nanjing covering his nose with blood all over his face. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. What happened to the Nan family master? He had only arrived a little earlier than her. Why was he injured again? Mu Hongyu coughed. I asked him about your situation just now. Not only did he refuse to tell me, but he even wanted to hit me. I had no choice but to retaliate. She sounded quite aggrieved. Everyone was speechless. Nanjing's forehead twitched. This Mu Hongyu was really good at distorting the truth. Upon hearing this, Chu Luiyue's expression turned cold. Nanjing, did you attack Hongyu just now? Nanjing could not deny it. He gritted his teeth and said, so what if I did? But she's not. Before he could say the word injured, Chu Luiyue quickly went forward and harshly kicked Nanjing's chest. Nanjing instinctively wanted to block it. However, he was not as fast as Chu Luiyue. There was a flash of light. Chu Luiyue kicked Nanjing with his long legs and accurately hit him. Bam! Nanjing did not even have time to set up a barrier before he was sent flying. Everyone hurriedly moved aside. Nanjing fell onto the silver bridge with a loud thud. Puffed. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale. When Chu Luiyue attacked, she specially summoned her divine body. Hence, this attack almost took half of Nanjing's life. Everyone retreated further when they saw that. Chu Luiyue did not hold back. If they continued to fight, it would not be good for them to bleed. No one was worried about Nanjing's condition. On one hand, most of the cultivators in the illusionary god palace were focused on cultivation. Most of them were not close to each other. On the other hand, Nanjing had entered the illusionary god palace immediately after he arrived. He did not have much contact with them, let alone anything else. I didn't attack you just now because you're the first divine envoy. However, that doesn't mean I'm a pushover. Chu Luiyue dusted his clothes and said mildly. Everyone was shocked when they heard that. The first divine envoy. What happened down there that involved the first divine envoy? Next time, before you attack, please consider whether you have the ability to do so. Otherwise, if you fail and get beaten up, where will you hide your face in the future? Nanjing was so angry that he could not speak. He spat out a few more mouthfuls of blood. He was already weaker than Chu Luiyue. Now that he was beaten up by Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu, he was even more miserable. Many people looked at each other and secretly exchanged glances. Chu Luiyue's words were really interesting. Nanjing had entered the illusionary god palace immediately met the first divine envoy and obtained permission to cultivate in the illusionary god ocean. Everyone thought that the first divine envoy would take good care of him. However, why did Chu Liyue not seem to be worried about causing trouble for himself after beating up Nanjing Shu? Chapter 23:14. Chu Liyue then turned to Mu Hongyu. Hongyu, let's go back. Mu Hongyu immediately replied, okay. Then, the two of them really went straight to the divine gate. Mu Hongyu even wrinkled her nose at Nanjing Shu when they walked past him. So that's all there is to a supreme god powerhouse. Although she was only a supreme god now, she had broken through to the initial realization realm. Her combat power was on par with a supreme god powerhouse. Nanjing Shu choked. His vision turned black, and he almost fainted from anger. However, the two of them couldn't be bothered with him. They went straight to the divine gate and stepped through it. Their figures quickly disappeared behind the flickering barrier, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded people standing in the same place. They really went back? Just like that? Speaking of which, Shangguanyu stayed in the illusionary god ocean for a few hours. How did she come out unscathed? That's not all. She even beat Nanjing Shu up. The first messenger is in charge of the illusionary god ocean. Logically speaking, he should know what happened here, right? Why didn't he punish Shangguanyu? The weird thing is, I thought Nanjing Shu really had the first messenger as his backer. But it seems like that's not the case. If the first messenger really had the intention to support Nanjing Shu, this wouldn't have happened. All sorts of discussions entered Nanjing Shu's ears, making him very frustrated. Of course, he wanted to know why this was happening. Even if he couldn't kill her for the zither score, there were many ways to punish her. But none. Chu Liyue was so presumptuous and had done so many outrageous things in the illusionary god ocean. The first messenger didn't punish her other than ordering her to stay away from the illusionary god ocean. Nanjing Shu couldn't figure it out. That person wasn't easy to talk to. Otherwise, the other messengers wouldn't be so afraid of him. But this time it was really strange. Nanjing Shu forced himself to stand up. No matter what, he couldn't stay here any longer. He had to return to the illusionary god palace as soon as possible. Chu Liyue and Mu Hongyu crossed the barrier and headed towards their residence. Mu Hongyu looked back and asked curiously, "What's the matter?" "Liyue, did you really leave that wound on Nanjing Shu's neck? You guys actually started fighting under the illusionary god sea?" Chu Liyue pondered for a moment, then said, "Not really. It was just an exchange of pointers, but they didn't fight. To be precise, she had single-handedly attacked Nanjing Shu. Unfortunately, the first oracle had arrived too quickly and did not have time to ask about the whereabouts of the third score. After that, it would probably be difficult for him to ask again. Fortunately, this trip wasn't completely fruitless." Mu Hongyu nodded in understanding. "That's right. Originally, I was watching the illusionary god see very well. In the end, I don't know why, but it suddenly stopped. It was as if something was blocking it." Chu Liyue smiled. "Since the first divine envoy has made his move, it will naturally be difficult for you to investigate." Mu Hongyu's almond-shaped eyes widened. Did the first divine envoy really go? Why didn't I see him? He didn't come in person. The seal that Nanjing Shu brought over contained a trace of the first divine envoy's aura. He came out when he sensed what Nanjing Shu and I were doing. I see. I knew that the power was very strong. Mu Hongyu finally figured out this problem and understood a lot more. I've long heard that the first divine envoy is very powerful. It seems like it's true. He only sealed a trace of his aura in the seal. It was already so powerful that it could easily cover the entire illusionary god sea. It was hard to imagine how powerful he was. That's why I wanted to meet him. Unfortunately, this kind of opportunity is hard to come by. Chu Liyue was not only amazed by the first oracle's power, but she also wanted to know something. She wanted to know if she had any history with the first oracle. At first, she didn't take it to heart, but later, that familiar feeling lingered in her heart. The strangest thing was that after Nanjing Shu left, she asked if they had met before, but the first oracle didn't answer. He didn't admit it, but he didn't deny it either. Of course, it was also possible that he didn't care to answer Chu Liuyue's question. But for some reason, Chu Liuyue didn't think that was very likely. She raised her head and looked into the distance at the towering, illusory God Palace. She would go in eventually. Nanjin Shu returned to the illusionary God Palace in a fluster. He had just returned to his residence when he saw someone waiting for him at the door. He was shocked. The 8th Divine Envoy? Why are you here? Shu Jing smiled. I'm here to wait for you. As she spoke, she glanced at Nanjin Shu, but she was not surprised at all. In fact, she had already known about what had happened outside 15 minutes ago. Nanjin Shu was instantly embarrassed and lowered her head subconsciously as she was being scrutinized by her. I wonder why the 8th Divine Envoy has suddenly come here. Shu Jing didn't answer his question. Instead, she sighed. It seems that Shangguan Yu is more arrogant and despotic than the rumors. Nanjin Shu was furious when he heard this. He let down his guard against Shu Jing. He wiped the blood from the corner of his lips. She has always been like this. Master Nan, didn't you take the first oracle's seal to the illusionary god Ocean? Why did Shangguan Yu bully you like this? Is she looking down on you, or does she not care about the first oracle at all? Shu Jing asked purposely. Offending Nanjin Shu wasn't a big deal, but offending the first oracle was a serious crime. She thought that Nanjin Shu would be furious and would complain to the first divine emissary. However, Nanjin Shu's expression changed several times before he finally said, "Don't worry, Mississippi." Finally, he said, "8th Divine Envoy, did you come here just to tell me this?" Shu Jing was stunned. Nanjin Shu's reaction didn't seem right. While she was thinking, Nanjin Shu continued. The first Divine Envoy has already made his decision. Naturally, we can only listen to him, said the first Divine Envoy. Shu Jing's heart skipped a beat. She finally realized that the first oracle already knew about this. But the current situation was his choice. The first oracle didn't punish Chu Liuyue. Shu Jing couldn't believe it, but Nanjin Shu didn't want to talk about it anymore. 8th oracle, if there's nothing else, of course there is. Shu Jing quickly reacted and suppressed the shock and confusion in her heart. The 6th oracle wants to see Master Nan. Nanjin Shu was stunned. The 6th oracle? Now. Shu Jing nodded and smiled. Master Nan, please follow me. This didn't give Nanjin Shu the right to refuse. Digression, 6 p.m. Chapter 23:15. At this moment, Chu Liuyue and Mu Hongyu returned to their residence. After the two entered the room together, Chu Liuyue found a pen and paper and drew the spatial layout under the illusionary god sea for Mu Hongyu. This was actually very difficult. Under the illusionary god sea, countless spaces intertwined and overlapped and were constantly changing. Even 1/10 of it could not be represented by the drawing on the paper. Fortunately, after the stones rolled out, they each froze a part of the space with the divine realm, which helped Chu Liuyue a lot. In addition, Mu Hongyu stood on the silver bridge and watched for a long time, so she was aware of the situation under the illusionary god sea. Therefore, she could understand it. After a while, Chu Liuyue finally stopped writing and handed over the map in her hand. Mu Hongyu took it and glanced at it. She was surprised. Liuyu, how do you know so much? These were all invisible and intangible. Her control of space was not top-notch, so it was reasonable to say that she could not give such a map. Chu Liuyue was about to speak when she saw Chang Wanzhou come to the door with tea in his hand. She smiled and waved. Little Zhou, come in. Chang Wanzhou walked in, came to Chu Liuyue's side, and poured her tea. It was the familiar taste of ginger tea. Chu Liuyue reached for the cup. The temperature was just right. She took a sip, and her lungs instantly warmed up. A unique fragrance with a hint of bitterness gradually diffused. Chu Liuyue narrowed her eyes comfortably, and her bright eyes almost curved into a crescent moon. Not to mention anything else, Xiao Zhou had always done well in these matters. However, he was now a god. It was really a waste of talent to serve her like this. Chu Liuyue held the tea and said, Little Zhou, don't do these things in the future. Chang Wanzhou froze, and a trace of panic flashed in his eyes. Master thinks I didn't do well? Chu Luiyue hurriedly waved his hand. Of course not. However, with your current status, doing this is really a waste of time and energy. These are only trivial matters. Master's matter is not a trivial matter. Chang Wanzhou pursed his lips and interrupted her, which was rare of him. Chu Luiyue was stunned. She looked up and saw his stubborn face. How stubborn? Chu Luiyue sighed in her heart and could only say, then, just pretend I didn't say anything? Chang Wanzhou gently nodded. A few strands of messy golden hair hung down from his forehead, covering the ripples in his eyes. Only his rose petal-like lips, which were slightly raised, revealed some of his emotions. Chu Luiyue helplessly held her forehead and smiled. Forget it. He could do whatever he wanted. Now that he had become a god, he was no longer as easily bullied as before. Chu Luiyue retracted his gaze and looked at Mu Hongyu. Here's what happened. Then he told Mu Hongyu everything that had happened in the illusory God Sea. Mu Hongyu was shocked and couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. So, your stones can suppress the space turbulence in the illusory God Sea? Chu Luiyue shook his head. Strictly speaking, it's not suppression. At most, it's just temporary. After all, those are the divine realms of the great gods, and their power is limited. She could feel that there was an extremely shocking power in the illusory God Sea. It was not something she could resist at the moment. But at that time, this power had not erupted. Mu Hongyu was stunned for a while. Suddenly, she remembered something and asked in a low voice. Then, what if it's the gravestone of the great gods? She knew the origin of the pile of stones. Chu Luiyue had gone to the Godslayer Mound and obtained them from the tombs of the great gods. According to Chu Luiyue, there were not only tombs of the great gods, but also of the great gods. Hearing her say this, Chu Luiyue was also dazed. I really didn't think about it before. When she went to the Godslayer Mound, her strength was limited, so she only stayed in the tombs of the great gods for a while. As for the area of the great gods, she really didn't go there. Normally, the gravestone of the great gods should contain more power, but no one can guarantee that the situation there will be the same as the great gods' tombs. Chu Luiyue murmured. Back then, these stones had taken the initiative to follow her, but who could be sure that the same thing would happen a second time? The great gods were much more powerful than the great gods. Mu Hongyu wrinkled her nose. What if she could really bring back the gravestone of the great gods? Then it wouldn't be a problem for Chu Luiyue to deal with the Mirage God Ocean. Chu Luiyue tapped her hand on the armrest and fell into deep thought. Mu Hongyu's words made sense. After all, she didn't expect these stones to choose to follow her. Maybe she should find some time to go to the Godslayer Mound again. Once she succeeded, her battle prowess would rise to the extreme. Chu Luiyue was tempted. The palace of the Mirage God. Nan Jinshu followed Xu Jing to the residence of the sixth oracle. As soon as he entered the courtyard, Nan Jinshu smelled a faint, bitter medicinal fragrance. He felt a little strange. The sixth oracle didn't seem to be a celestial physician. Why would there be a medicinal smell here? Xu Jing turned to look at him and said, The sixth oracle came back recently. The sixth divine emissary has just returned from outside and is currently recuperating. You just have to answer whatever he asks later. Nanjin Shu immediately said, Yes. Only then did Xu Jing step forward and knock on the door. Sixth oracle, Patriarch Nan is here. A moment later, a hoarse voice came from inside. Come in. Xu Jing gestured at Nanjin Shu with his chin. Nanjin Shu was startled and pointed at himself. I'll go in alone. Won't the eighth oracle come with me? Xu Jing smiled. The sixth oracle wants to talk to Patriarch Nan in private. I won't disturb you. Nanjin Shu was a little nervous, but he nodded and went in. Xu Jing closed the door. Creak. Nanjin Shu felt inexplicably nervous as he listened. He had been here for a while, and this was the first time an oracle wanted to see him. Nanjin Shu. The voice came from behind the screen. Nanjin Shu cupped his fists and bowed. Greetings, sixth oracle. Are you sure the third music score isn't a god-slaying tomb? Nanjin Shu was stunned. At first, he found it strange that the sixth divine emissary knew about this. However, after thinking about it, he realized that the first divine emissary had already sent someone to investigate. He nodded. Yes. Did you tell Shangwan Yu about this? Of course not. Nanjin Shu said hurriedly. This is a serious matter. How would I dare to tell her about it? That's good, as long as you know what you're doing. Besides, I heard that she went to the illusionary god ocean without permission. Yes, this woman is very daring. Did the first oracle know about this? Chapter 23:16. Nanjin Shu paused and said hesitantly, This counts, but it doesn't. At that time, I brought the seal of the first divine envoy to the illusionary god sea. When I clashed with Shangwan Yu, the aura of the first divine envoy gushed out from the seal and chased us out of the illusionary god sea. The first oracle didn't show up? No. Nanjin Shu was puzzled. The first oracle is in charge of the illusionary god sea. Even if he doesn't show up personally, he can easily find out everything that happens in the illusionary god sea. Besides, such a small matter shouldn't require the first oracle to make a move, right? Actually, this matter might be a big deal to him and Chu Luiwe, but it was definitely nothing to the first oracle. The illusionary god sea was boundless and vast. At most, the two of them were just messing around. Why would the first oracle make a special trip for this matter? Just the seal alone was enough to solve the problem. When you want to meet the first oracle, did you see him in person? The sixth oracle suddenly asked. Nanjin Shu hesitated. This no. Outsiders thought that he had entered the courtyard and must have seen the first oracle. But in reality, he had just stood outside the door and said a few words. He didn't even see that person's shadow. He didn't dare to hide anything in front of the sixth oracle. As expected, the sixth oracle murmured as if he had expected this, but he also seemed a little unwilling. Nanjin Shu almost thought that he was hallucinating. Why did it sound like the sixth oracle wanted the first oracle to appear personally? And he seemed to have expected that the first oracle wouldn't meet him? You said that the first oracle came out to stop the two of you as soon as the conflict broke out. Yes. Nanjin Shu described the situation at that time. Of course, he added some details, but he didn't know that Mo Shiqian was completely uninterested behind the screen. What he wanted to know was the first oracle's attitude towards Chu Luiwe. What kind of place is the illusionary god sea? In the past 10,000 years, 90% of the cultivators who trespassed there died and were buried at the bottom of the sea. As for the remaining 10%, even if they were lucky enough to escape, they would inevitably be severely punished. Even if they didn't die, they would be half dead. However, when it comes to her, it's different. He sneered coldly with a hint of mockery. Nanjin Shu felt a little uncomfortable when he heard this voice. But at this time, he didn't have time to think about this. His focus was the same as the sixth divine envoys. Sixth divine envoy, do you also find this matter strange? I originally thought that the first god's emissary wouldn't let Shangwan Yu off the hook so easily, but who would have thought that he wouldn't be punished at all? What do you think the first oracle is thinking? The thoughts of the first divine envoy are not something that we can guess. This, Nanjin Shu frowned. He could hear that the sixth divine emissary seemed to be very concerned about this matter, but perhaps because he was afraid, he did not continue to speak. All right, you can go back. Nanjin Shu was at a loss when the sixth divine emissary suddenly asked him to leave. Was he letting him go just like that? Could it be that the sixth emissary had asked him to come here just to ask about this? Let the sixth divine envoy get out. That voice carried an unquestionable pressure. Nanjin Shu's heart skipped a beat. He didn't dare to ask any more questions and quickly retreated. Mu Hongyu left with the map that Chu Luiwe had drawn. She still needed to go back and take a closer look at the situation below the illusionary god ocean. Also, she had to break through to the Mahayana realm as soon as possible. After Mu Hongyu left, Chu Luiwe asked Xiao Zhou to leave as well. She sat alone in her room to think. Now, there were a lot of things that she needed to solve. She hadn't finished her star path yet. This was the fastest and most suitable way for her to enter the illusionary god palace openly. Suli had been in the illusionary god palace for a while and would carefully investigate the situation from time to time. But after all, she was under the watchful eyes of the gods' emissaries. There were many things that Suli did not dare to go overboard with, so the information that she could find was limited. Until now, there were still no clues as to the whereabouts of Duga Mabao and Lan Shao. Chu Luiwei could basically conclude that the two of them were trapped in an extremely secretive location in the illusionary god palace. It would be impossible to rely on Su Li alone to find them. She still had to go in. At the same time, the third Guqin score was also very important to her. She had to think of a way to get information from Nanjing Shu. If she guessed correctly, the third Guqin score was still in the Divine Ruins world, and the two gods' emissaries, Jiu Long and Shi Yin, who had left earlier, were probably looking for the last Guqin score. Unfortunately, the two of them had already disappeared without a trace, leaving no clues behind. And Diwu Zhangze, who was trapped in the illusionary god ocean, what kind of person was the first god's emissary? Yua, a low and pleasant voice sounded. Chu Luiwei turned around and saw Rong Xiu walking in. He came in front of Chu Luiwei. Seeing her frown, he reached out and smoothed her brows. What are you thinking about? Why are you so tired? Chu Luiwei held his hand and rubbed her face against the back of his hand. It's still those. Rong Xiu smiled and hugged her. He leaned over and kissed her hair. Tell me about it. Miss Shangwan, I have something to do. Zhao, who had just walked to the door, was originally smiling. But when he saw the cold and noble figure hugging Chu Luiwei in the room, he was shocked and stunned. Why was she here? Chapter 23:17. The most important thing was that he seemed to have come at the wrong time. When the two people in the room heard the voice, they both looked outside the door. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Ming's heart trembled violently. He originally wanted to run away, but it was obviously too late now. If he wanted to go in, he really couldn't move his legs. Chu Luiwei raised the corners of his lips slightly. Lord Ming, why are you here? Please come in. He didn't dare to disobey Madame's orders. Silently holding his breath, he walked stiffly and braced himself to enter the house. Chu Luiwei stood up. Rong Xiu, let me introduce you. This is Lord Ming of Zhen Bao Pavilion. He usually treats me very well and has helped me a lot before. Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curled into a smile. I see. Lord Ming, I've heard a lot about you. Ming Shu's legs went soft. He barely restrained his urge to kneel down and bow. He forced a smile. You flatter me. I've heard a lot about you too. Ha ha. Rong Xiu laughed. Since Lord Ming has taken good care of you, as her husband, I naturally have to thank you properly. Ming Shu repeatedly said that he didn't dare. But it's just a small matter. It's not worth mentioning. At this moment, he was extremely grateful to the second master. If it weren't for that person's reminder, he wouldn't know when he had offended Madame. How could he stand in front of this person and talk to him like this? Chu Luiwei raised his hand. Lord Ming, please sit down. You can talk slowly. How could Ming Shu dare to sit down? He coughed, waved his hand, and said, No need, no need. I'm here today because I have something to tell you. I'll leave after that. Chu Luiwei looked at Ming Shu and felt that he was a little strange today. He seemed very nervous. It must be a big matter for you to personally solve the case. Please speak. Ming Shu tried his best to make himself look as calm and composed as he usually did. He said, It's like this. I came here this time to ask you if you've been in contact with Mu Yafeng recently. Chu Luiwei was stunned. Mu Yafeng? No, why? You frowned. Actually, it's nothing much. It's just that Mu Yafeng has continued to walk the star path since yesterday. Furthermore, in a short span of one day, he had broken through 3 great Grandmaster Xian formations. I thought it was a little strange, so I thought I'd come over to ask you. Look, Lord Ji thinks that I revealed the contents of the mythical flame diagram to her. Chu Luiwei immediately understood. Please don't misunderstand. Zhao hurriedly explained, I just feel that this matter is really strange, so I wanted to ask you for confirmation. After all, those Xian formations were extremely difficult to decipher. Previously, she didn't make any progress for such a long time, but now she's suddenly improved by leaps and bounds. Chu Luiyuan nodded in understanding. What Lord Ji said makes sense. Previously, Senior Xiao Ran had also said that he had spent several years on those great Grandmaster-level profound formations before he had barely comprehended them. Originally, according to his speculation, Mu Yafeng should also need a long time to decipher this Xian formation. Previously, she was busy with the illusory god Si, so she didn't know that Mu Yafeng had made a move again. Now that she heard it, she also felt that it was very strange. The mythical flame diagram is a treasure of Treasure Pavilion. When I agreed to help copy it, I already knew the rules. I would never easily reveal it to outsiders. I didn't even reveal it to my subordinates. Lord Mingshu, you can rest assured about this. You hurriedly said, "Of course I believe in your character. I have no intention of doubting you." Heavens! He was really just curious, so he came over to ask. Who knew that he would bump into this person? Wasn't this suspecting that there was something wrong with Madame? Even if he was given 10 more guts, he wouldn't dare to do this. If he had known that this person was here, he would never have stepped into this courtyard. Chu Luiyuan smiled. I know that Lord Yu has no ill intentions. Actually, it's not just you. I also feel that it's a little strange. Mu Yafeng's talent is not bad, but with her own strength, it is indeed impossible for her to decipher 3 Grandmaster Xian formations in such a short time. Chu Luiyuan's words were tactful. In fact, it should be said that it was absolutely impossible. If she had this ability, she wouldn't have dragged her feet on the Star Passage for so many years. In the eyes of many people in the illusory God Palace, Mu Yafeng was already a rare genius. But in Chu Luiyuan's opinion, it was fine. Mingshu heaved a sigh of relief and said, not only that, she hasn't finished yet. She's still on the Star Passage. When I came here just now, I passed by and took a few glances. There was a bit of an irresistible force. Chu Luiyuan was a little surprised. You mean, she plans to directly finish the Star Passage and enter the illusory God Palace? Mingshu paused. It's hard to say, but if her performance is still like this, then it might really work. Chu Luiyuan frowned slightly. In fact, she didn't care much about Mu Yafeng. But this matter was really strange. Otherwise, she wouldn't have made a special trip. I'm here today mainly to talk about this matter. It's up to you how you think. Mingshu said. Chu Luiyuan nodded. Thank you for reminding me, Lord Yu. Mingshu waved his hand. Then, if there's nothing else, I'll leave first. There's still some things to deal with in the Treasure Pavilion. Hearing this, Chu Luiyuan didn't ask him to stay. I'll send you off. No need, no need. I took the liberty to disturb the two of you. I'll leave now. How dare he really let the two of them send him off? As he spoke, he walked outside. Take care, Lord Yu, Rongxiu said lightly. Mingshu staggered, but a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. He steadied himself and looked up. Suddenly, the corner of his eyes twitched. Yan Qing stood with his sword in his arms. There was no expression on his handsome and cold face. He just looked at him quietly. Yu quickly swallowed the rest of his words, nodded slightly, and hurried away. For some reason, his footsteps became faster. Almost in the blink of an eye, he had already opened the gate of the courtyard and slipped away. In such a hurry, Chu Luiyuan looked at Yu's back and muttered in a low voice. The person he just mentioned, is she the one who asked you for the mythical flame diagram? Rongxiu tilted his head and asked. Chu Luiyuan nodded thoughtfully. That's her. However, based on my understanding of her, she shouldn't be able to do such a thing. Even if she went back to cultivate in seclusion for a while, she shouldn't have advanced by leaps and bounds. The 7th Oracle values her very much. I don't know if she went to consult him. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly and said lightly, the 7th Oracle really doesn't have good taste. Chapter 23:18. His tone was light and indifferent, extremely natural. Chu Luiyuan glanced at him, wrinkled her nose, and smiled. There aren't many people who dare to say that the seventh divine emissary has no foresight. The divine emissaries had a very high status in the illusory god palace. Many people would be extra careful when talking about them, let alone such a straightforward judgment. Rongxiu bent his finger and lightly scratched her nose. Am I wrong? He's a Xian master himself. It's impossible that he can't see my Yu-Er's talent. Chu Liyue shrugged and sighed. Isn't it because you don't have a bloodline totem? From the first day she came here, she deeply understood how much contempt and ridicule she would face without a bloodline totem. Rongxiu's eyes narrowed slightly as his finger lightly brushed across her forehead. Chu Liyue's heart moved. She leaned closer and whispered, Rongxiu, the infinite divine dial, can only test people with bloodline power? Rongxiu looked at her. After a moment, he said, Of course. Bang! A stream of light flew up and quickly bloomed into an extremely brilliant Xian formation. Mu Yafeng looked up with unconcealable excitement in her eyes. The fourth one. This was already the fourth Xian formation she had cracked in a row on the Star Road this time, and it only took her less than 2 days. Not far behind her, many people were watching. Seeing that she had successfully cracked another Xian formation, the crowd instantly became restless. What's wrong with Mu Yafeng? Why did she suddenly become so powerful? The further she goes, the more complicated the Xian formation is. I remember that she was trapped in a Xian formation for a long time and couldn't crack in the end. So she had no choice but to give up. How long has it been? She's back again, and her progress is so smooth. Her talent has always been outstanding. Maybe she suddenly had an epiphany. If this continues, she can really comprehend all the Xian formations and officially enter the illusory god palace, right? I thought it would be Shang Guanyu. Ha! What a joke. Shang Guanyu is very powerful, but she doesn't have a bloodline totem. It won't be her turn, right? That's true, but other than that, she's really powerful. Didn't you guys hear that she went to the illusory god ocean and came back safe and sound? She even beat Nanjing Shu. If she didn't have the confidence, would she dare to do that? Mu Yafeng was in a good mood when she heard the envy and admiration of the people in front of her. However, the name that appeared later caused her eyes to turn cold. It was just because he had some talent that he dared to act so recklessly. I heard she was because she made demands of herself as the second divine emissary of God to the illusory god. She's really arrogant. The second oracle could tolerate her once or twice, but it was hard to say what would happen if she did it too many times. Mu Yafeng shook her head, dispelled the messy thoughts in her mind, and continued forward. This time, no matter what, she had to complete the star path and enter the illusory god palace. In the courtyard, Rongxiu and Chu Liyue sat facing each other. A translucent chessboard floated between them. On it, the two chess pieces were fighting fiercely. Chu Liyue stared at the chessboard and rubbed her chin. Ever since she read the mythical flame diagram and officially broke through to the great Grandmaster realm, her Xian formation cultivation had improved greatly. But after fighting with Rongxiu, she felt a deep sense of defeat. Now, no matter where she went, there was no way to reverse the situation. She was at the mercy of others. Master, there. Go there. An anxious voice came from behind her. Chu Liyue looked back helplessly. Little Hachi, how many times have I told you not to speak while watching the game? Can't you just paint your nails in peace? Little Hachi pursed her red lips and waved her hand. How can I be at ease when Master can't win? Look, it's all messed up. Chu Liyue, are you complaining that your master is not good enough? Little Hachi narrowed her eyes and quickly smiled. Of course not. I'm doing this for your own good. Look, you've played with His Highness for so many years, but you've only won a few times. Chu Liyue, I remember this clearly. I really don't need you to remind me. She raised her chin. You want me to go there? Little Hachi's eyes lit up. Yes. Then watch carefully. Swoosh. Chu Liyue flicked her finger, and a piece condensed from divine power flew out and landed on the spot Little Hachi pointed out. Rongxiu's eyes were calm as he placed a piece. It was as if a sword had slashed down and completely sealed Chu Liuyue's last path. Chu Liuyue spread her hands. Did you see it clearly? If we do as you say, it will only make your master die faster. Little Hachi shrank her neck guiltily. Ahem, master, I haven't been learning for long. Of course, I can't compare with you and His Highness. I promise I won't say anything next time. Chu Liuyue said. You said the same thing last time and the time before that. Little Hachi pursed her lips and made a sewing gesture. Chu Liuyue gently knocked her forehead. You won't remember it anyway. She was used to it. Little Hachi's eyes were filled with tears. She really wanted to help her master win. At this moment, Shijing walked in from outside. Chu Liuyue was a little surprised. Shijing, where did you go? She didn't see Shijing after returning from the illusionary god sea. Roy bowed to them one by one before explaining. Master, I went to the Thunder Pool. Chu Liuyue was slightly stunned. Isn't the Thunder Pool sealed? Now, there shouldn't be anyone in the illusionary god palace going there. Shijing chuckled. Yes, but I just went to the shore to take a look. I didn't do anything else. Chu Liuyue laughed. All the Tianlei in the Thunder Pool have been frozen. What's there to see? Shijing said. Nothing. Master, there are a lot of Tianlei in the Thunder Pool. The second oracle and the others only sealed the upper layer, but the lower ones are still fine. Chu Liuyue frowned slightly. Oh, how do you know? This matter was extremely confidential and hidden. Ordinary people definitely wouldn't be able to guess. Shijing paused. Just guessed? The Tianlei power below is still wandering around. If you stand close and take a closer look, you can see it. Chu Liuyue looked at him meaningfully. Shijing sighed. You. Chu Liuyue was about to speak when Sun Yi suddenly pushed open the door and came out. Master. Seeing that his expression was different from before, Chu Liuyue knew that something must have happened, so she immediately asked, What's wrong? Sun Yi came to her. Chi Han sent a message saying that they met Jiu Long and Shi Yin in the god-slaying tomb. What? Chu Liuyue was shocked and stood up. Because she was too shocked, she didn't notice that Sun Yi didn't call the two oracles but directly called them by their names. Chapter 23:19. God-slaying tomb. What are they doing there? Chu Liuyue had thought of many places, but she had never thought of the god-slaying tomb. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Could it be that the last Guqin score was in the god-slaying tomb? But that couldn't be right. Back then, she had finally gotten the second Guqin score from Senior Ah Jing in the god-slaying tomb. If the third one was there, how could he not know? Her brows were tightly knitted together. Rong Xiu asked, Did you just get the news? Sun Yi nodded. He could contact everyone in the 13U. After getting the news, he immediately came to Chu Liuyue. Of course, he knew how important the last Guqin score was to Chu Liuyue. Chu Liuyue pondered for a moment and suddenly thought of a question. Why is Chi Han in the god-slaying tomb? You just said them. Who else is with him? Sun Yi said, an old six. It seems that they went there to help old six break through. But they didn't expect to run into those two. Chu Liuyue froze. Chi Han and the others haven't seen Jiu Long and old six. How would they know who they are? Sun Yi explained. They haven't seen those two, but they know that you're in the Illusion God Palace and know a thing or two about this place. Besides, those two are above the God level. Even if they don't know who they are, once they use their strength, it's hard to imagine. That's true. This made sense. Rongxiu's eyes fell on Chu Liuyue. What's your plan, you are? Chu Liuyue was silent for a long time before she finally took a deep breath. To the god-slaying tomb. To go to the god-slaying tomb, they had to leave the heavenly gate. Not to mention Jinyan Lai. Even Chu Liuyue felt that this trip was too troublesome, but they still had to go. For the sake of convenience, this time, Chu Liuyue and Rong Xiu went together, and no one else was brought. When the two of them arrived at the gate of heaven, there was no one there. In fact, most of the time, this place was empty. Who would come to the heavenly gates to play? Wasn't that just looking for trouble for himself? Last time, it was because of Nan Jinshu's incident that caused such a huge commotion. However, Now that Nanjinshu had returned to the palace of the illusory god and was staying there obediently, there was no need to mention the others. Looking at the barrier in front of him, Chu Luiwei didn't hesitate. He raised his hand and pressed it. Buzz, a ripple spread out. Chu Luiwei turned around and looked at Rongxiao. The seventh divine envoy is in charge of the gate of heaven. If there is any movement here, he will immediately rush over. You didn't see him last time, so you can meet him this time. Rongxiao smiled. Sure. The palace of the illusory god. Jin Yunlai sensed the familiar aura at the gate of heaven. His forehead twitched violently, and with a crack, he broke the brush in his hand. It's her again. This Chu Luiwei, is there no end to it? Last time, he said he was going to invite the weapon-refining saint. Last time, he said he was going to see Nanjinshu. What is it this time? Jin Yunlai didn't want to pay attention to him, but the gate of heaven was constantly moving. Chu Luiwei was determined to go out. After a while, Jin Yunlai finally couldn't help but stand up. However, before he could walk out, a voice suddenly came from afar. Jin Yunlai. Jin Yunlai was shocked when he heard the voice. The first divine envoy. Then, an illusory figure gradually appeared in front of him. However, the figure was shrouded in a layer of faint light, making it difficult to see his facial features. He could only barely make out a silhouette. Even so, Jin Yunlai recognized at a glance that it was indeed the first divine envoy. He took a quick glance and immediately looked away. He bowed his head and said respectfully, Greetings, first divine envoy. May I know why the first divine envoy is here today? Due to nervousness, Jin Yunlai's body was a little stiff. Ever since the first divine envoy went into seclusion, he had never stepped out of the courtyard. Although he did not appear with his true body and was only a strand of his aura, this was the first time he had done so. Don't you know why I'm here? The voice was low and indifferent, but it carried an invisible pressure. Jin Yunlai's chest tightened. He frowned and quickly searched his mind. Recently, he didn't seem to have done anything. Why did the first divine envoy sound like he was scolding him? This, please enlighten me, first divine envoy. Buzz. There was movement at the gate of heaven again. Jin Yunlai subconsciously turned his head to look. The first divine envoy had already made his move. Whoosh! A red stream of light flew out quickly and went straight to the gate of heaven. Jin Yunlai was shocked. The first divine envoy made his move personally. The Xian formations on the star passage can only be comprehended by oneself. Otherwise, it will be regarded as cheating. Then Mu Yafeng, what's going on? Do you want me to continue asking? Jin Yunlai's heart sank. The crimson streak of light flashed through the air at high speed. It arrived at the gate of heaven in the blink of an eye. Chu Luiwei heard the movement and looked up. He felt a little strange. This is the first divine envoy's aura? Noticing this, a look of shock flashed across her eyes. Then, the red stream of light landed on the barrier. The enchantment quietly opened. Chu Luiwei was stunned. After waiting for a while, Jin Yunlai didn't arrive. Instead, the first divine envoy made his move. What does he mean by this? Chu Luiwei couldn't figure out for a moment. Warning? Reprimand? Rongxiao smiled faintly. Maybe the seventh divine envoy is busy. Digression, very good. Someone in the comments section guessed part of the truth. 6 o'clock. Chapter 23:20. When Jin Yunlai did not show up, Chu Luiwei did not pay much attention to it. However, when the first god emissary suddenly made a move, she was very surprised. Could it be that he finally decided to come out of seclusion? But something like opening the gate of heaven, it seemed that no matter what, it was not his turn to do it. Rongxiao held her hand. There's no time to lose. Chu Luiwei retracted her gaze and gently nodded. The two figures quickly disappeared outside the gate of heaven. After a while, the barrier reassembled and was very calm. Chu Luiwei's departure did not attract the attention of the people in the illusory god palace. On one hand, many people's attention was on Mu Yafeng. On the other hand, the movement in the gate of heaven was too small. From the beginning to the end, only a short period of time had passed. Only the divine envoys who were guarding the various locations raised their heads in astonishment when they sensed this fluctuation. This is the first god emissary made a move. More importantly, he seemed to be at Jinyan Lai's residence. In an instant, several god emissaries immediately moved out and headed towards Jinyan Lai's direction. The first god emissary had been in seclusion for several years. Now that he finally made a move, they naturally had to go and check it out. Illusory God Palace. There was dead silence in the huge room. Jinyan Lai stood there with her fists clenched. Most of her strength seemed to have been sucked out of her body. Even opening her mouth to speak was difficult. Her face was pale, and her lips trembled slightly. She felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Every word of the first god emissary's questioning was heavy and cold. After a long time, she finally found her voice. I just gave her a little reminder. A little reminder? The first god emissary asked. Jinyan Lai closed her eyes and finally said dejectedly, "Yes, I intentionally helped her. The gate of heaven will only open for a year. If she is unable to comprehend all the Xian formations on the star path before the deadline and enter the illusory god palace to ascend to the heavens, then she will have to wait for another 10,000 years. A few months have already passed, and she is still trapped in those Xian formations. I just feel that her talent is not bad. It is a pity to wait so long. Who, in the illusory god palace, didn't wait like this?" The first oracle let out a rare laugh, as if he had heard a joke. "Xiao Ran has already been stuck in the last few profound formations for 30,000 years, but I don't see you helping him." Jinyan Lai could hear the dissatisfaction in the first oracle's words. But Xiao Ran was Xiao Ran after all, and Mu Yafeng was different. "First divine envoy, ever since I took control of the star path, no one has successfully walked through the star path and entered the illusory shrine. This period of time was truly too long. Many mystic cultivators had already lost their confidence, and fewer people were even trying. If this continues, that's because they don't have the qualifications to enter the illusory god palace. Back then, didn't you successfully complete the star path and even become the 7th divine envoy?" Jinyan Lai looked troubled. But back then, it was because Jinyan Lai felt a chill in her heart when she sensed a cold gaze on her. She immediately swallowed the rest of her words. After a long while, he said, "This is Yun Lai's fault. Yun Lai will accept any punishment given by the first oracle. But there are some things that I have to say. Mu Yafeng is the most talented mystic cultivator in the illusory god palace in the past 10,000 years. If even she can't do it, then there's no need to talk about the others. If I have to choose to help someone ascend to the heavens and become a god, I will still choose her. You also understand the situation of the profound formations on the star path. The further you go, the more difficult it is. If you don't have enough talent and strength, even if someone gives you pointers, it's still useless. I admit that I helped Mu Yafeng, but she was able to succeed because of her own reasons. Besides, strictly speaking, I did give her some pointers, which may not even be as detailed as the annotations on the mythical flame diagram. If Shangwan Yu can read the mythical flame diagram, why can't Mu Yafeng? In the beginning, he actually didn't have this idea. On one hand, it was because he thought highly of Mu Yafeng and always felt that these problems weren't difficult for her. On the other hand, he didn't have such plans before. But as time passed, the development of the situation gradually deviated from his expectations. On Mu Yafeng's side, she was unable to crack the profound formation and was trapped in one place for a long time without any intention of continuing. On the other hand, Chu Luiwei continuously advanced with the help of the mythical flame diagram and successfully stepped into the area of the Grandmaster's profound formation. If this continued, Chu Luiwei might really surpass Mu Yafeng. That wasn't the result that Jinyan Lai wanted to see. Because she didn't have a bloodline totem, Jinyan Lai was biased against Chu Luiwei from the beginning and always felt that she would leave the illusory god palace soon. Who knew that not only did she not leave, but she also caused a lot of trouble and became the focus of the illusory god palace. If she really took the lead, not only would Mu Yafeng be unhappy, but Jinian Lai would also feel like she was slapped in the face. Even if Chu Luiyue couldn't ascend to the heavens and become a god, as long as she performed better than Mu Yafeng, it was inevitable that everyone would talk about her. And Jinian Lai, who was in charge of the star path, would naturally be implicated. What would happen in the end? Everyone would see that Mu Yafeng, who he had always thought highly of, was actually not that outstanding at all. Instead, it was Chu Luiyue, who had been despised and ridiculed from the beginning, who easily crushed her in all aspects. Thinking of this scene, Jinian Lai felt that it was hard to accept. So when Mu Yafeng came to beg him, he thought about it again and agreed. And her performance did not disappoint him. He thought that everything would go smoothly, but who knew that this matter would alarm the first divine emissary? The first divine emissary listened quietly for a long time before asking, "Are you done?" Jinian Lai let out a long breath. "I'm done. It seems that you still think that you did nothing wrong." The first divine emissary's voice was faint with a trace of indifference. "Jinian Lai, I always thought that you were very smart, but now it seems that you are ridiculously stupid. Until now, can't you see that Zhanbao Pavilion took the initiative to give the mythical flame diagram to Shangguan Yu?" Jinian Lai was shocked and suddenly looked up. "What? Zhanbao Pavilion giving it to Shangguan Yu and you helping Mu Yafeng don't seem to be the same nature, right?" Chapter 23-21. Jinian Lai stood there in a daze for a long time. His mind was in a mess, and his whole body was in a mess. Zhanbao Pavilion took the initiative to give it to her? Didn't this mean that he suddenly thought of something and sucked in a breath of cold air? A look of horror flashed across his eyes. First Oracle, only now did he realize what he had done wrong. Now, he had no time to think about why Zhanbao Pavilion did this. He only knew that this time, if he was not careful, he would lose himself. "I'll go and take back the Xian formation diagrams that I gave to Mu Yafeng." The first Oracle suddenly asked, "You gave her the method to break all the Xian formations?" Jinian Lai swallowed his saliva with difficulty, but his throat was still tight. In the eyes of the first Oracle, this reaction naturally meant that he admitted it. "That's right. Since you've made up your mind to help, of course, you have to help until the end." The first Oracle's voice was emotionless. This made Jinian Lai even more flustered. "Just as well. Open your eyes wide and take a good look. See if Mu Yafeng can ascend to the heavens and become a god with your help." Jinian Lai felt suffocated and uncomfortable. He wanted to defend himself, but he couldn't say a word. Knock, knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. "First Oracle, are you there?" This was Xu Jing's voice. She did not go to her mountain today, so when she heard the commotion, she hurried over. She was the first to arrive. Jinian Lai was about to speak when he saw the phantom in front of him suddenly disappear. He wanted to ask her to stay, but she had already disappeared. It was just the aura of the first Oracle. He could come and go as he pleased. He took a deep breath and rubbed his face hard. After being the seventh Oracle for so many years, he had always been cautious. This time, he was impulsive and went easy on Mu Yafeng. He did not expect that he would be caught red-handed by the first Oracle. Although the first Oracle did not give him any substantial punishment, this made him even more nervous. He really could not understand what that person was thinking. Was he planning to come out of seclusion? If that was the case, there was nothing wrong with it. But the crux of the matter was, with so many things happening in the illusory God Palace recently, why did that person target him? Helping Mu Yafeng cheat was neither a big deal nor a small matter. No matter what, it couldn't be more important than the lightning pond and foaming mountain, right? First Oracle, Xu Jing waited for a while, but he still didn't hear any movement inside, so he shouted again. Creak! The door was opened. Jinian Lai appeared behind the door. When Xu Jing saw him, he subconsciously looked inside. The first Oracle has already left. Jinian Lai said coldly. That person really came? Xu Jing looked shocked. He's willing to come out of seclusion? That's not right. Why is he looking for you the moment he comes out? Jinian Lai didn't want to talk too much with her, so she just said perfunctorily, the first divine emissary did not come personally. He only sent a wisp of his aura to ask me some questions. Xu Jing's expression softened a little, but he still felt quite surprised. What's the matter that actually alarmed the first oracle? Jin Yunlai glanced at her. You came here to ask about this? Then you can leave. After saying that, he closed the door again. Bang! Xu Jing didn't expect his actions to be so swift and straightforward. She was so shocked that she took half a step back. When she came back to her senses, she was immediately angry. Didn't she come to ask because she was too surprised that the first oracle had come out of seclusion? What kind of attitude was this? If it weren't for the fact that Jin Yunlai's status was slightly higher than hers, she would definitely not let it go so easily. Xu Jing tidied her clothes and turned to leave. After taking a few steps, she suddenly thought of something and turned back to look at the tightly shut door. Just now, Jin Yunlai's expression was particularly ugly. Did something happen between him and the first oracle? She thought for a moment and raised her voice. Seventh oracle, I heard that Mu Yafeng has already cracked 6 great Grandmaster Xian formations in a row. Aren't you going to take a look? Bang! Jin Yunlai suddenly smashed something. Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat. What is wrong with him? Wasn't Mu Yafeng someone he particularly valued? Now that she had an outstanding performance, why was he still so angry? Xu Jing had a bad feeling. She gritted her teeth and finally turned to leave. After that, a few more oracles came to find out what was going on, but they were all sent away by Jin Yunlai with a few words. When Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu left the illusory god palace and crossed the blue and black sea, she deliberately slowed down. Unfortunately, nothing out of the ordinary happened. After that, the two quickly rushed to the god-slaying mound. Because it wasn't their first time there, and because their strength had improved greatly, it only took them a short time to get there. At noon the next day, the two successfully arrived again. After passing through the forest, they officially entered the god-slaying mound. Looking from afar, it was vast and barren, bleak and cold. It was no different from before. It was just that the inexplicable coldness and pressure seemed to be stronger than before. There was a faint smell of blood in the air. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. It had been a long time since they had been here, and the god-slaying mound seemed to have some subtle changes. They should already be inside. Rong Xiu looked into the distance and narrowed his eyes. Chu Luiyue nodded. Then, the two walked forward hand in hand. At this time, deep in the god-slaying mound, Qi Han was holding a long sword and staring at the two in front of him vigilantly. Behind him sat a young man covered in blood. It was Lu Feng. Zhu Long laughed. You want to enter here with just the two of you? Chapter 23-22. In front of them was a large area of broken tombstones. A desolate and sorrowful aura slowly spread out. This was the tomb of the honored god. Qi Han and Lu Feng had been in the god-slaying mound for some time. They had spent a lot of time and effort to get here. They did not expect Zhu Long and Shi Yin to arrive at this time. As soon as they arrived, they ordered everyone to leave without hesitation. Most of the cultivators in the god-slaying mound had been forced to leave. Of course, not everyone was willing to do so. However, these two were too powerful. Even honored gods could not last more than 3 moves against them. Everyone had no choice but to obey. Zhu Long and Shi Yin had entered from the edge of the god-slaying mound, so they were the last to arrive here. They met Qi Han and Lu Feng, who were waiting outside the tomb. The aura of the tomb of the honored god had changed slightly with the passage of time. To ensure their safety, the two decided to wait here until the aura was at its weakest before going in. When Zhu Long and Shi Yin arrived, Qi Han and Lu Feng had already waited here for 3 days. As expected, they were also chased away, but they did not agree. After a short stalemate, Zhu Long and Lu Feng attacked. After a few rounds, Lu Feng was injured and defeated. Qi Han held his sword in front of Lu Feng to guard against Zhu Long's next move. Of course, Zhu Long didn't take his actions seriously at all. They were just 2 exalted gods. What was there to care about? Zhu Long looked down at the two of them. My patience is limited. I can't be bothered to continue arguing with you. I'll count to 3. If you don't leave by then, don't blame me for being merciless. Shihan said coldly. The god-slaying mound is not anyone's private territory. Every cultivator in the world comes here. You want everyone to leave? That's too unreasonable. 1. Long raised one finger. Obviously, he did not care about Shihan and Lu Feng. He could not be bothered to continue arguing with them. After all, he had already given them the warning he needed. If they insisted on not listening, there was nothing he could do. Lu Feng coughed and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He twitched his lips without a smile. Shihan, there's no need to say so much to them. If they were reasonable, they would not do such a thing. Shihan glanced at the two of them and said slowly, That's right. Reason? Don't you know that in this world, strength is the only thing that matters? 2. Long raised her eyebrows. These two people were really not afraid of death. Unfortunately, perseverance without strength was ignorant stubbornness. Not only was it meaningless, it would even bring him a lot of trouble. The first messenger only said that the two of them would come and find the last piece of music, but he did not say where it was. The god-slaying tomb was huge. Even if the two of them worked together, it would still take a lot of effort to find it. Because they were worried that someone would find the music score before them, the first thing they did when they arrived was to drive everyone out. Better to be safe than sorry. Although this would be troublesome, it would avoid some risks. Overall, it was worth it. Most of the people he had met before were quite obedient, or rather, sensible. After seeing that Long and Xian's strength far exceeded theirs, they all gave up and retreated. Only these two were stubborn. 3. Long shouted the last count, shook his head, and raised his hand. It's your honor to die in my hands. He did not want to dirty his hands with the blood of the exalted gods. Unfortunately, these two were not smart enough. Vigorous divine power quickly gathered in Long's palm and transformed into a long sword. The long sword was bright and sharp, and it was covered with a thin layer of frost. Under the sunlight, it shone with a cold light. Then, he raised the sword and slashed down. The sword fell silently, but wherever it passed, space was quickly cut open and then collapsed. Large swathes of black spatial cracks appeared, and violent energy surged out from them. Shihan gripped his sword even tighter. Just as he was about to attack, he realized that he could not move at all. The powerful aura suddenly descended, and he could not retaliate at all. Long's sword fell from the sky and was about to kill Shihan and Lu Feng. A bloody wound suddenly appeared between Shihan's eyebrows. That was an extremely sharp sword energy, and it easily broke through his defense. Long's eyes were indifferent. Die. That sword flew toward Shihan at an even faster speed. However, right at this moment, a sharp sound of air being torn apart suddenly came from afar. Swoosh! Then a bright golden and greenish-black sword light flew from the sky, piercing through the clouds and wind. Clang swish! That sword light and Long's long sword collided, and then quickly flew up and slashed across. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere. Long's sword was sent flying just like that. Seeing this, Long was shocked and immediately raised his hand to call back his sword. The sword landed in his palm and was still trembling violently. It could be seen how powerful that blow was. He frowned and looked over. That was an extremely sharp long sword. Half golden, half greenish-black, neatly and perfectly blended together, and the glow was bright and heavy. This was just as Long and Xian were shocked. Shihan and Lu Feng had already sensed the extremely familiar aura on that sword. The two of them quickly looked at each other and saw the excitement in each other's eyes. Long turned his head and looked in the direction where the sword came from. He shouted in a deep voice, "Who is it?" A clear and pleasant voice drifted over with the wind. Ninth Divine Envoy, if you want to kill my people, you should at least ask for my permission first, right? Long was stunned at first. Then he realized that this voice was very familiar. A name suddenly appeared in his mind. Shang Guanyu. Just as he finished speaking, a woman in a red dress appeared in a flash. Her figure was slim and graceful, and her beauty was unparalleled. Her black hair flew in the wind, and the hem of her dress danced. There was a faint smile on her face, and her starry eyes were slightly curved like the moon, as if they were filled with starlight. Jiulong's face darkened. "It's really you." Chi Han and Lu Feng could no longer suppress their emotions and shouted in unison. "Master!" Chu Luiwei came in front of the duo and sized them up. She only relaxed when she saw that their injuries weren't particularly serious. She smiled and said, "Don't worry. Fortunately, we're not too late." Jiulong frowned and stared at the few people in front of him. "The two of them are your subordinates." Chu Luiwei turned around and tucked her hair behind her ear. She raised her finger, and the Star Spectre sword returned to her hand. She smiled. "Yes." Chapter 23:23. Jiulong looked at the woman in front of him in shock. He had only used 30% of his strength in that attack, but it wasn't something an ordinary cultivator could withstand. And yet, Chu Luiwei had blocked it so easily. He had heard this name a few times recently. After all, she had caused quite a commotion in the Illusion God Palace. But it wasn't until today that Jiulong realized that her strength was indeed far beyond that of an ordinary god. "You came out of the Heaven Gate?" Jiulong asked. Chu Luiwei smiled and nodded. "It's not the first time I've come out. Ninth Divine Envoy, why are you so surprised?" Jiulong choked. He just felt that it was too ridiculous. Most of the cultivators in the Illusion God Palace would never step out of the Heaven Gate, let alone come to the world of Divine Ruins. And those who came from the world of Divine Ruins were proud to be able to enter the Illusion God Palace. They didn't want to leave. There were very few people like Chu Luiwei who kept going in and out of the house. Her frequency was even higher than that of the Divine Envoys. Wasn't the seventh Divine Envoy in charge of guarding the Heaven Gate? Why did they let her come out again and again? More importantly, she didn't have a bloodline totem. Wasn't that even more ridiculous? Jiulong stared at her vigilantly. "What are you doing here?" Even if she left the Illusion God Palace, there were many places she could go. Why did she choose the God-slaying tomb? It was related to the last Zither score, so Jiulong couldn't help but feel suspicious. Chu Luiwei blinked. "My two subordinates are here. What's so strange about me coming here?" "But the two Divine Envoys, why did you suddenly leave the Illusion God Palace and come here and drive everyone else away? What are you doing?" Jiulong's expression was cold. "That's not something you have the right to ask." Chu Luiwei said, "Oh, it seems that the two Divine Envoys don't want to reveal. Then forget it." As she spoke, she raised her head toward Chi Han and Lu Feng behind her. "Let's go." She was about to go to the tombs. "Stop." Jiulong never thought that Chu Luiwei would actually walk in without a second word. He didn't even put them in his eyes. Chu Luiwei stopped in his tracks and turned his head to ask, "What's wrong? Is there anything else?" Jiulong gritted her teeth. "It seems like you've turned a deaf ear to what we've said before." Chu Luiwei asked. "Words? What words?" Jiulong felt stifled in his chest. Chi Han explained. "Master, they have already chased away all the cultivators here. If you hadn't come in time, I'm afraid we would have already." Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows. "Oh, about that." She was wondering why she hadn't seen anyone along the way. It turned out that Jiulong and Shi Yin had chased them away. In that case, it was even more obvious what they wanted to do. Chu Luiwei tilted his head and looked at Jiulong and Shi Yin. "That's really unfortunate. I've come this time because I have something important to do, so I won't be able to leave for the time being. I hope the two Divine Envoys will forgive me." Although she said so, her expression and tone were extremely natural. There wasn't the slightest hint of apology in them. Clearly, she wasn't asking for help. She was just informing them of her choice and decision. She was going to stay here. Yin frowned and said coldly, "Shang Guanyu, you've done so many outrageous things in the Illusion God Palace. For Dumpling's sake, the Divine Envoys didn't pursue the matter. But that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. If you don't listen to our advice, don't blame us for being impolite." Chu Yui's lips curved into a faint smile. "Forgive me for being blunt, but I don't think the Divine Envoys have done anything extra for me. Why do you look like you've given me a lot of things?" Yin felt even more annoyed. In the Illusion God Palace, the divine envoys were revered. No matter what they said or did, their subordinates would do as they were told. Very few would object, and even fewer would dare talk back to them. But now, Chu Luiyue had done all of this, and she didn't seem afraid at all. Who gave her the confidence? Shang Guanyu, are you sure you want to continue being so impudent? Zhu Long raised his sword and pointed it at her. No matter how powerful your eminence is, she's still your eminence. If he used his full strength, Chu Luiyue wouldn't be able to retaliate at all. Chu Luiyue blinked and smiled in the face of the cold sword light. Divine envoys, if I'm not wrong, the two of you are also here for that last Zither score, right? Since everyone has the same goal, why don't we work together and find it first? We could talk about the rest later. These words caused Jiu Long and Shi Yan's expressions to change. This was something that the first divine messenger had specifically instructed the two of them. How did she know about it? Seeing the duo's reaction, Chu Luiyue also found it interesting. She glanced at the two of them, then slowly asked, "You've come here to find the Zither scores. The two of you have already come here to look for the Zither score. Don't tell me that you still don't know. The two Zither scores from before have already recognized me as their master?" "What did you say?" Zhu Long and Xian both exclaimed in shock. Chu Luiyue shrugged. It seemed that they really didn't know, since the first divine envoy gave you this task. Why didn't he tell you about it? Not many people knew that she was the master of the Zither scores, but Nanjing Shu was one of them. He had chosen to tell the first divine envoy the location of the last score, so there was no reason for him not to tell her. Besides, someone like the first divine envoy should know this like the back of his hand. Otherwise, how could he be qualified to be called the first divine envoy and be in charge of the entire Illusion God Palace? But the strange thing was, these two didn't know. Jiu Long was about to attack. Chu Luiyue calmly raised her hand. "Wait, ninth divine envoy. I've already said that the two Zither scores are with me, and they already belong to me. If you kill me now, you won't get a single one." Once she died, the two Zither scores would be scattered and hidden away again, and they would never be found again. Unless there was something wrong with their heads, Jiu Long and Shi Yan would never touch her. This was also why Chu Luiyue dared to be so frank. Since she couldn't hide it, she might as well be frank. "You dare threaten us?" Jiu Long gritted her teeth. Chu Luiyue sighed helplessly. "I've already made it so obvious, but you two only realized it now." She had always been a straightforward person. If she wanted to threaten someone, she would do it openly and openly. The first two Zither scores were with her. If they had the ability, they would have to fight for it. She wasn't afraid of death, but she didn't know if the Illusion God Palace would be afraid of getting nothing in the end. Chapter 23-24. Jiu Long and Xian never expected that Chu Luiyue would do such a thing. She directly admitted that the two Zither scores were with her and used them as leverage to threaten them so that they wouldn't dare to kill her. She was so direct that she didn't even give them any time to react. The most hateful thing was that after thinking about it carefully, they realized that Chu Luiyue wasn't so arrogant for no reason. After knowing this, even though they hated her to the core, they didn't dare to do anything to her. "Since you're looking for the Zither scores, and I'm also looking for one, isn't it just right for us to work together?" Chu Luiyue asked with a smile. Jiu Long was fuming with anger. "What do you mean by just right? Shang Guanyu, do you really think we're fools?" The Zither scores had already recognized her as the master, so even if they found the remaining one, it would most likely end up in her hands. In this aspect, she had an absolute natural advantage. Even if they worked together and found the Zither scores, it would just be a wedding dress for her. Right now, they couldn't wait to guard against her, so why would they work together with her? Chu Luiyue looked regretful and spread her hands. "It seems that the two of you aren't willing. Since that's the case, then let's mind our own business and rely on our own abilities. How about it? This Zither score belongs to whoever finds it first." Jiu Long and Xian looked at each other. Of course, they didn't want to agree to Chu Luiyue's suggestion. She was the master of the Zither scores, so she had an advantage over them. But if they didn't agree, looking at her posture, It seemed like she was going to continue to cause trouble, and they couldn't do anything to her. After a long while, Xian gave Jiulong a look, then looked at Chu Luiyue. Since you insist, it's not that we can't agree. But we also have a condition. Divine Envoy, please speak. Whether or not we can find the zither scores will depend on our own abilities. However, the person who brings the zither scores back to the Illusion God Palace will be the real winner. At that time, no matter what the result is, the other side can't continue to fight for it. Chu Luiyue's red lips curved slightly. I knew these two people wouldn't be easy to convince. So this was what they were planning. One had to know that there was a considerable distance between here and the illusory God Palace. Who could predict what would happen in the middle? Even if she found it first, they could snatch it from her halfway and forcefully take it for themselves. In this way, he would be able to achieve his goal. Chu Luiyue was a god, while Qi Han and Lu Feng, who stood behind him, were both high gods. Jiulong and Xian, on the other hand, were both at a level higher than her eminence. Wasn't this clearly bullying? Once they made a move, Chu Luiyue's side would not be able to compete with them even if they tried their best. This was clearly a robbery. However, after Chu Luiyue thought about it seriously for a while, he nodded happily and agreed. Sure. Chu Luiyue's reply was too sudden. Even Jiulong and the other two were momentarily stunned. However, one thing needs to be clear. Does returning to the illusory God Palace refer to passing through the gate of heaven or something else? If you insist that it only counts after entering the illusory God Palace, then wouldn't I have lost from the start? Chu Luiyue shrugged. Naturally, it counts after passing through the gate of heaven. Xian added. Although he didn't know why Chu Luiyue agreed, this condition was clearly beneficial to them. It would be a waste not to use it. It would be best if the two of them could directly find the last zither score. If Chu Luiyue was one step ahead of them, they could just snatch it back. As long as they didn't harm her life, everything else was still under their control. Jiulong's mood finally calmed down. Since we've discussed it, then, rumble. A loud sound suddenly came from afar. Jiulong and Xian immediately turned to look. This sound came from the depths of the tomb. Someone had already entered. The two looked at each other. Jiulong immediately realized something and looked at Chu Luiyue angrily. You secretly brought someone here? Chu Luiyue smiled, and her eyes curved into crescents. I didn't say that I came here alone. You. Jiulong was so angry that her teeth were itching. She had said so much just to stall for time. Xian frowned. Forget it. Now is not the time to argue with her. Let's go in and see what's going on. This commotion came so suddenly that it was definitely not something an ordinary cultivator could do. Something must have happened in the tombs of her eminence. Perhaps it has something to do with the last zither score. Jiulong glared at Chu Luiyue. Shangguanyu, it's too early for you to be happy. The one who has the last laugh is the winner. Chu Luiyue couldn't be bothered with the two of them. She turned to Qi Han and Lu Feng. Let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot, and her slender figure quickly disappeared from the spot. She went straight into the depths of the tomb. Qi Han and Lu Feng followed closely behind her. Fortunately, the two of them weren't seriously injured. Moreover, Chu Luiyue and Jiulong had been fighting for a while, so they had rested enough and quickly followed. Jiulong cursed under her breath and followed Xian. Jiulong and Xian's cultivation level was higher than Chu Luiyue's after all. In just a few breaths' time, they had overtaken them. The two of them didn't stop and went straight in the direction of the voice. After about 15 minutes, they saw a figure in the distance. It was a young man. At this moment, his back was facing them. His clothes were whiter than snow, and he was tall and straight. He had one hand behind his back. The space in front of him was already beginning to distort and collapse, and it was constantly devouring the energy around him. Even though it was only a back view, that cold and noble aura was still not concealed in the slightest. Jiulong frowned. Is this the person who came with Shangguanyu? Why does it look like something is wrong? He couldn't tell what was wrong, but there was an inexplicable sense of uneasiness in his heart. However, he quickly threw this feeling to the back of his mind. Who are you? How dare you team up with Shangguan Yu and deceive the two of us? Zhulong asked in a low voice. Hearing her voice, the man turned around. His handsome and devilish face seemed to be covered with a thin layer of frost. His phoenix eyes were deep and unparalleled. Zhulong, Xian, you're getting bolder. Digression, I want to eat barbecue. I'm going to be a fan 600 pin. Chapter 23-25. This question instantly caused Zhulong and Xian to be shocked on the spot. Emperor, the two of them were shocked. Their previous arrogance immediately disappeared and was replaced by deep respect. Why are you here? Zhulong's face turned pale. What did he say to the Emperor just now? No wonder he felt that something was wrong when he saw this figure. This aura, he actually didn't recognize it. Actually, Zhulong couldn't be blamed. After so many years, the number of times he had seen the Emperor could be counted on one hand. On one hand, the Emperor didn't show up most of the time. On the other hand, with his and Xian's seniority, they were usually quite far away from each other. They couldn't be said to be familiar with each other. Moreover, they didn't expect that the Emperor would appear here. Rongxiu looked up slightly. Three figures could be vaguely seen from afar. They were Chu Luiwei and the other two. Their strength was not as strong as Zhulong and Xian. In addition, Qihan and Lu Feng were only in the High God realm and were injured, so their speed was even more limited. As a result, the distance between the two sides was so large in a short period of time. However, this made it convenient for Rongxiu. This short period of time was enough for him to solve the problem of the two. Thinking of this, Rongxiu retracted his gaze and looked at the two again. Feeling that indifferent and cold gaze on them, Zhulong and Xian felt a sense of pressure and their bodies tensed up. Didn't you already guess why I am here? He said indifferently. The two of them were stunned. After a while, they suddenly came to their senses and were shocked. Wait, what does the Emperor mean? Did he really come with Chu Luiwei? But Chu Luiwei's background. When did he have contact with the Emperor? Furthermore, it would appear that the relationship between them was not ordinary at all. Otherwise, Chu Luiwei wouldn't have used such a tone when he mentioned the Emperor. Xian suddenly thought of something and gasped. Emperor, that Shangguan Yu is one of your men? He was guessing that Chu Luiwei was Rongxiu's subordinate and nothing else. However, Rongxiu was too lazy to correct him. He only raised his eyebrows slightly. His people, there was nothing wrong with that. Ben was his. His reaction, in the eyes of the other two, was obviously a tacit agreement. For a moment, the two of them did not know how to react. Why didn't Chu Luiwei mention such an important matter before? If she had revealed even the slightest bit, she definitely wouldn't have received that kind of treatment in the illusory God Palace. Zhulong and Xian couldn't figure it out. The only thing they were clear on was that they had offended Chu Luiwei earlier, and this undoubtedly meant that they had offended the Celestial Emperor as well. Celestial Emperor, we have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai, which is why we offended you. Please forgive us. Zhulong came back to his senses and quickly begged for mercy. Other than begging for mercy, he couldn't think of anything else he could do now. Previously, he had rushed overexcitedly, intending to find the last zither score before Chu Luiwei. Even if he couldn't find it, it wasn't bad to get rid of the person who conspired with her first. Who knew that he would bump into this person? Wasn't this courting death? Xian saw the situation and immediately followed suit, his heart filled with uneasiness. Although they had only seen the Celestial Emperor a few times, they were very clear about the Celestial Emperor's temperament. It was definitely not to be provoked. The mistake that they had made today was enough for them to suffer a lot. Rongxiu didn't say anything. The surroundings fell into a dead silence, as if even the air had frozen at this moment. The two of them held their breaths, as if their hearts were about to jump out of their throats. Finally, Rongxiu spoke. Go to the illusory god sea and receive your punishment. Without Ai's permission, you are not allowed to leave. Hearing this, Zhulong and Xian were stunned. Celestial Emperor means now. Rongxiu's eyes moved slightly, and his thin scarlet lips raised into an extremely cold arc. If you can continue to stay here, it will be considered as your ability. The two of them trembled at the same time. This meant that if they didn't leave immediately, the Celestial Emperor would personally take action. Even if the two of them had the guts, they wouldn't dare to take such a risk. Wasn't this taking the initiative to throw themselves into a knife's mouth? But, Celestial Emperor, it's not that the two of us deliberately disobeyed your orders, but this time, we are here on the orders of the first Divine Envoy to find the last Zither score. If we can't complete the mission, I'm afraid that when we return, we won't be able to explain it to the first Divine Envoy. Zhulong braced himself and spoke with difficulty. If they had any other choice, they wouldn't choose to go against the Celestial Emperor. But in this situation, they really had no choice. After all, the Divine Envoys were from the illusory God Palace. Since the first Divine Envoy had ordered them, they didn't dare to disobey. Although the Celestial Emperor had a noble status, under most circumstances, he wouldn't interfere in the matters of the illusory God Palace. And the Zither score was also an item of the illusory God Palace. Logically speaking, this matter shouldn't have much to do with the Celestial Emperor. Why would he come here personally? Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. What? Ai's orders can't even compare to the words of the first Divine Envoy. We don't dare. Zhulong and Xian's souls almost flew out of their bodies as they hurriedly denied. Not to mention them. Even a master of the illusory God Palace had to respectfully greet the Celestial Emperor when he saw him. How could they dare to say that? After weighing the pros and cons, the two of them struggled for a while before finally nodding with difficulty. We obey the Celestial Emperor's orders. But the last Zither score, Rongxiu narrowed his eyes. The Zither score came from the illusory God Palace, so it should return in the end. Hearing this, Zhulong and Xian only thought that he agreed to return the last Zither score to the illusory God Palace after finding it. No matter what, they would be able to answer to the first Divine Envoy when they returned. Then, the two of us will take our leave. After saying that, seeing that Rongxiu's expression was normal, the two of them bowed respectfully and then hurriedly turned and left. Their speed was even faster than when they came. They were afraid that if they were a step late, they would lose their lives here. After a while, the two figures quickly disappeared into the distance. At this moment, Chu Luiwei and the other two finally arrived. Seeing that only Rongxiu was here, Chu Luiwei was stunned. Where are the two Divine Envoys? Chapter 23-26. Rongxiu turned around. Ooh, Chu Luiwei said. The 9th and 10th Divine Messengers. The two of them just came here. Didn't you see them? Rongxiu shook his head. I've been here the whole time. I didn't see anyone coming. Chu Luiwei frowned. How could she not see them? Although the two Divine Messengers had put some distance between her and Seven Childu Wind, she was sure that they were coming this way. She looked left and right. The surroundings were barren and desolate. There were no signs of anyone coming here. Suddenly, she focused her gaze and looked at the collapsing void not far behind Rongxiu. Rongxiu followed her gaze and explained. The loud noise just now came from here. The last time I came here, something similar happened, but it was different. Chu Luiwen nodded slightly. She had noticed this as well. The last time, she and Rongxiu fell into a space that suddenly collapsed, and they brought the rocks back. This time, the energy and pressure here were much stronger than in the tombs of the high gods. Although the void was constantly swallowing energy, twisting and collapsing, it was not completely overturned yet. From this, one could see how powerful the power of space here was. At a glance, a transparent vortex had formed in the void. It kept spinning and expanding. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth kept surging into it, gradually turning it into a black hole. It cannot be seen or touched. Only the vast pressure was getting heavier and heavier, indicating the danger within. It was still rising. A faintly discernible summoning force came from the vortex. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly and walked forward. Master, Chi Han and Lu Feng called out worriedly. Chu Luiwei raised her hand. Don't worry. I know what to do. With that, she continued to walk forward. At this moment, a piece of gravel the size of a palm suddenly rolled over from the side. It only stopped when it touched the tip of her foot. Chu Luiwei looked down. Obviously, this stone came from one of the tombstones, and it was the tomb of the High God. She bent down and picked up the stone. Suddenly, she heard a faint buzzing sound in front of her that could not be ignored. Buzz. She looked up in surprise, only to see that the vortex not far in front of her had suddenly stopped spinning. But this situation only lasted for a moment. The next moment, everything returned to normal. It didn't seem any different from before. However, Chu Yuyue's eyes widened in shock, because there seemed to be an invisible connection between her and the vortex. This feeling was very strange. From this moment on, she could vaguely feel the changes in energy of the vortex. She was stunned for a moment. Then suddenly, she looked at the stone in her hand. It was just a shattered, weathered, and ordinary-looking rock. There were traces of erosion on it. If it was on the ground, no one would take a second look at it. However, this was a tombstone that belonged to a high god. At this moment, the void to her right twisted and collapsed, then quickly formed a vortex. Another stone rolled to her feet. Chu Luiwei sucked in a breath of cold air. An absurd and daring idea surfaced in her mind. It can't be, she muttered softly. Then, she bent down and picked up the second stone. Almost at the same time, the second vortex stopped spinning. Chu Yueyue's hand slowly clenched. Then, the vortex spun again, and it established that invisible connection with Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei was shocked. As expected, the stones here were similar to the ones she had obtained in the High God's tombstones, but in fact, they were very different. Each of them actually controlled a space. It might be an exaggeration to say that they controlled it, but it was basically the same. The surrounding energy was constantly surging toward the two vortexes, and the two stones in Chu Yue's hand seemed to be faintly strengthening. Although it was subtle, it could not be mistaken. Clang! Suddenly, the sound of a zither came from Chu Yue's dantian. The sound of a zither was bleak and cold, and it spread far and wide in this vast wilderness. Chu Luiwei frowned subconsciously. She did not do anything just now, so why did the sound of the zither suddenly appear? Suddenly, a cry of surprise came from the wind. The void over there is also starting to collapse. And there, Chu Luiwei followed his gaze. Not far behind them, 3 more vortexes quickly appeared. The vast space seemed to be divided into countless small areas, and they all started to collapse. In just a few minutes, Chu Luiwei and the others were already surrounded by several void vortexes. A few stones rolled over and stopped at Chu Luiwei's feet. Her heart raced, and the blood in her body seemed to be boiling. Her guess seemed to be correct. These stones, these tombstones of her eminence, these heroic souls that had been buried for tens of thousands of years, seemed to be awakening. Her eminence was naturally different from a high god. A high god's combat strength was in the god domain, but her eminence had completely divided this world and controlled the endless power of space. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Void vortexes appeared around them one after another. More and more stones came to Chu Yueyue's side, as if they were responding to her summons. Clang, clang. Chu Yueyue's glabella was boiling hot. Chapter 23-27. She touched the area between her eyebrows. It was as if there was a burning flame burning there. Her heart was beating rapidly, and the blood in her body was surging. This was her totem. Chu Luiwei had known about the existence of this thing for a long time, but it had only appeared a few times when she was in a life-or-death situation. Hence, she had not been able to pay much attention to it. But now, this totem had suddenly appeared again. It was so clear. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth started to gather towards her quickly. Her aura also started to rise rapidly. Buzz, buzz. Chu Luiwei looked up. Above the heavens, The void was continuously distorting and collapsing. Vortexes were constantly appearing. Large pieces of rocks had already piled up beside her feet. An unparalleled amount of energy exploded, creating an extremely terrifying pressure that made it hard for people to breathe. Beside her, Lu Feng clutched her chest and sat down. She coughed a few times and wiped away the blood at the corner of her mouth. Then, she placed her hands on her knees and started to channel the surrounding energy into her body. Under such a powerful pressure, the best way to deal with it was to cultivate. Seeing this, Chi-Han's expression became serious. He also placed his sword in front of him and started to cultivate. At this moment, endless energy was surging towards them from all directions. Most of it entered the collapsed void, which indirectly strengthened the power of the rocks beside Chu Liuyue's feet. The remaining small portion dissipated and was swallowed by Lu Feng and Chi-Han. Although the energy that the two of them occupied was only a small portion compared to the energy that was surging into the void, it was definitely an extremely vast amount for an exalted god. A faint blue glow overflowed from Lu Feng's body and quickly enveloped him. This was his godly territory. After the violent energy entered this godly territory, it was refined and became even purer. Without a doubt, this greatly increased Lu Feng's cultivation speed. Chi-Han, who was beside her, made the same choice almost at the same time. A faint silver glow silently spread out and enveloped Chi-Han's body. Rongxiu's gaze turned slightly and paused on the two of them for a moment. His eyes were deep, yet calm and indifferent. In the next moment, he looked away. In fact, if there were other cultivators present, they would definitely be shocked to see Lu Feng and Chi-Han's situation. After all, the two of them were only high gods. Logically speaking, their god realms should not be able to resist the terrifying might of the venerable god around them. It was even to the extent that the deity domain could not be used under such circumstances. However, from the beginning to the end, the movements of these two people were extremely smooth and natural, as if they were not hindered in the slightest. If Chu Liyue turned around to take a look, she might have sensed that something was wrong. However, all her energy was focused on the collapsing void and the gathering stones. How could she care about anything else? One after another, as more and more stones approached her, the invisible connection between her and the void vortexes around her became closer and closer. At the same time, a sense of desolation and sorrow welled up in his heart. Chu Liyue was never a sentimental person. However, as she stood here, as time slowly passed and everything around her kept changing, her state of mind seemed to be moving along uncontrollably. A wind blew, carrying the coarse gravel of the desolate wilderness. When it brushed past her face, it brought a slight stinging pain. The smell of blood in the air seemed to have thickened. The solemn and bleak sound of the zither rang out from her body and spread far and wide. There seemed to be an image that appeared in her mind, but it was not very clear. Chu Liyue raised her hand almost instinctively. Her eyes focused and seemed to have sunk into nothingness. At this moment, there seemed to be countless stars in the depths of her obsidian-like eyes. Then her slender and white fingertips gently plucked. Clang! There were no strings under her hands, so she used the countless intersecting spaces as support to play the zither. Clang, clang. Shattered tombstones stood in great numbers on the wilderness. There seemed to be a zither sound in the depths that resonated with her from afar. The palace of the illusory god. Jiulong and Shi Yin returned as fast as they could. After stepping into the illusory god palace, they did not care about anything else and hurried to the residence of the first divine envoy. Just as they arrived outside the courtyard and stood still, the door of the courtyard opened. Seeing this scene, Jiulong and Xian looked at each other and saw the worry and nervousness in each other's eyes. The first divine envoy obviously knew something. This made them timid, and for a moment, they did not dare to take a step forward. Come in and talk. A low and indifferent voice came from inside. The two did not dare to refuse and walked in nervously. Just like last time, they stopped when they were 5 steps away from the door. After respectfully cupping their fists, Zhu Long spoke after some deliberation. First divine envoy, this time, the two of us did not do well and did not succeed in bringing back the zither score. Please punish us. Reason? The voice was calm and collected, without the slightest hint of surprise. This, Zhu Long wiped the sweat from her forehead. However, Xian could not help but explain. First divine envoy, this time we failed to return because the emperor also went to the god-slaying tomb. Also, Shanghai Yu went with him. Maybe because Shanghai Yu was the owner of the first two zither scores, the emperor intended to let her do it. Although we don't know why the emperor suddenly intervened, we did not dare to disobey the emperor's order, so we came back. However, the emperor promised to send the zither score to the illusory god palace after this matter is over. Zhu Long gritted her teeth and added, in addition, the two of us have been ordered to the illusory god sea to receive punishment because we offended the emperor unintentionally. Without the emperor's order, we are not allowed to go out. In other words, after explaining to the first divine envoy, the two of them had to go to the illusory god sea. After the two of them finished speaking, the room was silent for a long time. This strange silence caused the two of them to be somewhat at a loss. Just now, they did not say anything wrong, did they? No matter what, they had explained the matter clearly. If one thought about it, one would understand that this matter was not their fault. Not to mention them, even the first divine envoy did not dare to disobey the emperor's order. Moreover, the emperor had already punished them. What else could be considered enough? Zhu Long and Xian waited for a long time. First divine envoy? Finally, they got a response. I already know about this matter. You can leave now. You should receive your punishment, but this matter cannot be spread. The two of them were stunned. You mean, the emperor went to the god-slaying tomb? The voice paused. Everything and everyone related to the zither score must be kept secret. Chapter 23-28. This was the highest secret of the illusion god palace, so it was normal for the first divine envoy to ask them to keep it a secret. Without any hesitation, the two of them immediately agreed. Yes, if the other divine envoys ask, just say that you didn't manage to find the score and offended the emperor, so you were sent to the illusion god ocean. There's no need to mention anything else. Zhu Long paused. He could guess what the first divine envoy meant, but he wasn't sure. After a moment of hesitation, he finally asked, First divine envoy, then? Shang Guanyu is the emperor's woman. Don't you understand the emperor's attitude? The first divine envoy interrupted him with a cold and indifferent voice. Zhu Long was shocked and hurriedly said, Yes, Zhu Long understands. Xian understands. That woman had been in the illusion god palace for so long, but she hadn't revealed anything. The emperor's intentions were clear. The only thing that wasn't right was probably the extra attention and care that Zhanbao Pavilion had given her. But that matter didn't arouse too many people's suspicions. After all, Chu Luiwei was a mystic master and had great talent and strength. Even if she didn't have any background, it was normal for Precious Treasure Pavilion to be willing to support her. Zhu Long and Xian had heard about this before, but they didn't take it to heart. But now that they thought about it, they realized that there was a reason for everything. It was just that if this reason were to be revealed, who knew how many jaws would drop from shock? The two even secretly rejoiced that they hadn't interacted much with Chu Luiwei. Other than the dispute over the score in the god-slaying tomb, they hadn't offended her much. Judging from the emperor's attitude, it was clear that he valued her greatly. It wouldn't be good to provoke her. You may leave. Hearing this, the two heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly left. After they left, the gate of the courtyard was tightly shut. In the courtyard, little Hachi was lazily resting on a chair, holding a scarlet pill in her hand. She narrowed her eyes and looked at it through the light. Jian Fengshi sat next to her with his hands on his knees. A rare hint of nervousness appeared in his charming peach blossom eyes. Did you refine this yesterday? Little Hachi asked. Jian Fengshi nodded. A total of 6 pills. They're all here. There was a jade bottle beside little Hatchie. The one in her hand was the first one she had poured out. The veins on it were clear, and the medicinal fragrance was rich. This was a top-notch Grand Physician-level pill. Then, with a light pinch of her fingernails, the pill instantly turned into ashes. Little Hatchie! Jian Fengqi's eyes widened instantly. Why did you destroy my pill? Little Hatchie blinked. Didn't you ask me to help you refine the pills? This is my answer. There's no need to keep this pill. Go back and continue to work hard. Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched. It took an entire day. You managed to refine a pill of this standard in just one day? As a Grand Physician, aren't you a little too weak? Little Hatchie's words successfully blocked Jian Fengqi's remaining words. Then, little Hatchie picked up the jade bottle beside her. With a squeeze of her palm, the jade bottle, along with the pills inside, was instantly turned into ashes. Jian Fengqi suddenly stood up, his handsome features distorted for a moment. With just these, you'll never be able to break through to Grand Physician level in this lifetime. Little Hatchie clapped her hands, took out a snow-white handkerchief, and carefully wiped her hands clean. Jian Fengqi clutched his chest and took a step back. He pointed a trembling finger at little Hatchie, but he couldn't say anything. He was angry. He thought that he had suffered enough during this period of time, but he underestimated little Hatchie's fighting ability. Last time, he stole a medical book from little Hatchie. Although he didn't say it out loud, he was still very grateful to little Hatchie. So after he finished refining this time, he specially came to ask little Hatchie for help. But what awaited him was an absolutely merciless attack from all sides. Jian Fengqi regretted it for a moment. When he first got the medical book, why did he think that little Hatchie was a good person? He was really blind, really blind. Little 8 was finally satisfied when he saw him being angered to this extent. Actually, she wasn't so sharp-tongued in the first place, and she wasn't deliberately targeting Jian Fengqi. It was just that she had suffered too much from Big Brother recently and needed to find someone to calm down. Seeing Jian Fengqi suffer, little Hatchie immediately felt much better. That's right, she was still very outstanding. In fact, Big Brother was still the pervert. Yes, that was it. Thinking of this, little Hatchie narrowed her beautiful eyes and said with a smile, "Seeing that you've worked hard to refine these pills, I'll say one more thing. There are 2 medicinal herbs in here. You've used the wrong ones. Of course I know what's wrong with these pills." Jian Fengqi snorted. Little Hatchie was stunned and sat up. Really? Jian Fengqi pursed his lips. Isn't it just raging winter grass and riverwood? Originally, we should use wind thousand seeds and devil's snare to replace them. Little Hatchie raised her eyebrows and looked him up and down. Oh, I couldn't tell. You really know? Jian Fengqi didn't say anything. He was still distressed over the bottle of pills that little Hatchie had just crushed. However, little 8 didn't mind and asked again, "Since you know, why don't you change it? If these 2 medicinal herbs are used well, the level of this pill can be raised from senior doctor to senior doctor." Jian Fengqi did have some skills. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to compete with Chu Luiyue for so many years and still be just a hair's breadth away. This in itself was enough to show that he actually had extraordinary talent. Many times, a tyrannical opponent could often stimulate a person's potential to the greatest extent. Jian Fengqi was like this. Although he had been defeated repeatedly over the years, he had unknowingly left countless people far behind. Hearing little Hatchie's question, Jian Fengqi sighed. "You think I don't want to do this? But Herb Mountain doesn't have those 2 medicinal herbs. How is that possible?" Little Hatchie's face was full of astonishment. Although these 2 medicinal herbs were precious, they couldn't be considered top-grade rare items. Moreover, what did Herb Mountain have? I've asked. They did have them before, but the last batch was harvested decades ago. Although there are new ones, they're not old enough. These 2 medicinal herbs required at least 100 years of age. He had no choice but to give up. Little Hatchie blinked and then stood up. Impossible. Herb Mountain has always been guarded by the 8th Oracle. How could she make such a low-level mistake? No matter what kind of heavenly treasure, when harvesting it, must not be completely seized. Instead, the foundation must be left behind. Little Hatchie's heart suddenly burned with a ball of fire. Is she crazy? Chapter 23-29. The corner of Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched as he held his forehead helplessly. This person's temper was still as bad as before. In the entire illusory god palace, there were probably only a few people who dared to scold a divine envoy like this. He waved his hand and motioned for Little Hatchie to sit down and restrain herself. Little Hatchie, lower your voice. Are you afraid that others can't hear you? Although this was their own courtyard, it couldn't stop the walls from having ears. If someone heard it and reported it to the 8th divine envoy, then Little Hatchie's brows furrowed. Did I say something wrong? Herb Mountain is such a large territory, and there are many kinds of herbs. How could someone have picked them all? And more than one kind. She's a divine envoy. Isn't she too ridiculous? Xu Jing had always considered himself as the manager of Herb Mountain, and now it turned out like this? Seeing her huge reaction, Jian Fengqi's heart instantly felt touched. Little Hatchie, I didn't expect you to be so concerned about my alchemy. Little Hatchie glanced at him. Brother, don't misunderstand. I'm just worried about those herbs. Jian Fengqi, pretend I didn't say anything. Little Hatchie crossed her arms and paced back and forth in the courtyard in annoyance. She really couldn't figure out what Xu Jing was doing. The key was that in the past few years, she had imposed various restrictions on entering and leaving Herb Mountain. With just this, how could things turn out like this? Little Hatchie struggled for a while and finally couldn't help but walk out. Jian Fengqi hurriedly asked, Hey, where are you going? Little Hatchie was angry. To Herb Mountain. I want to see if she deliberately hid the herbs, or if she really let someone use them all. Jian Fengqi was stunned. Strange, when did Little Hatchie become so angry? He wasn't angry himself, so why was she so angry? Seeing that Little Hatchie was really going out, he hurriedly stood up to stop her. Little Hatchie, I think we should just forget about it. Is she the 8th oracle? If he really let her go there so excitedly, she would definitely cause trouble. Little Hatchie raised her eyebrows. What? You don't dare to go? Jian Fengqi was speechless. Was this a question of whether he dared or not? At this moment, Xi Jing also walked out of the house and headed outside. Seeing the two of them standing at the door, he greeted them. Yo, Little Hatchie, are you going to Herb Mountain again? Little Hatchie nodded. That's right. How did 4th brother know? Yoshii suddenly paused and staggered. He quickly supported himself on the door and coughed. Ahem, I heard you guys talking about this just now. Does 4th brother also support me going? Little Hatchie pouted and asked pitifully. 4th brother, you have no idea what Xu Jing has done to Herb Mountain. Shijingo glared at him and immediately patted his chest. Go. In this illusion god palace, where can't Little Hatchie go? Don't worry, with 4th brother here, no one will bully you. When 4th brother is done, I'll go find you. 4th brother is still going to the lightning pool. That's right. Xi Jing nodded. I think they don't plan on unsealing it yet. I really don't know how long they'll drag it out. His tone was filled with dissatisfaction. He had been going there almost every day recently, and Little Hatchie was already used to it. She nodded in agreement. It's a bit too much. 4th brother, you go first. I can handle my own matters. Don't worry. Jian Fengqi, who was standing at the side, was confused. These two, what were they talking about? Why did it sound like those oracles really couldn't do a good job, and they were very dissatisfied with it? Chu Luiwei was used to being arrogant. Why were the 13 Yu guards learning from him? They didn't even have a bloodline totem, but each of them was more arrogant than the other. Lightning Pool, Herb Mountain, why did it sound like it was her territory? Mitsui responded and gave her a thumbs up, praising her. Thank you for your help. Little Hatchie, you're so beautiful today. 81st smiled, then asked, What's the matter? You weren't beautiful yesterday? Mitsui immediately said with great sincerity, Little Hatchie is beautiful every day. The second most beautiful woman in the world. The number one beauty was their master. This was the tacit agreement of the 13 guards. Hearing this, little 8 was indeed satisfied, and only then did he wave his little hand. Then fourth brother goodbye. Only then did Shijing leave. After taking a few steps, Shijing lightly slapped his own mouth. Who told you to be so talkative? Who told you to be so talkative? Actually, when he was in the room, he had been thinking about the lightning pool. He didn't hear a single word of what little Hachi and Jian Fengqi said outside. When he was about to leave, he coincidentally bumped into them, and a sentence came out just like that. Luckily, he managed to cover it up. Shijing took a deep breath, then quickened his pace and walked forward. With Shijing's support, little Hachi immediately became more confident and went straight to her mountain. Jian Fengqi saw that he couldn't persuade her, so he could only follow her. Little Hachi looked back at him and teased. Why? Aren't you worried that you'll cause a lot of trouble if you go with me? Jian Fengqi said seriously. No matter what, this matter started because of me. I can't just sit back and do nothing. Little Hachi was interested and asked. Then, if I fight with Shu Jing, Jian Fengqi said without hesitation. I'll cheer for you. Little Hachi, she knew that she couldn't rely on this brother of hers. The two of them were very fast. Her mountain was the same as usual. People came and went, and it was very lively. When they saw little Hachi coming over, many burning gazes fell on her. At the same time, some of them glanced at Jian Fengqi with hostility. Jian Fengqi was silent for a moment. Little Hachi, I'm a little regretful. Can I go back now? Little Hachi walked forward without looking back. What are you afraid of? Let them look. It's not like you'll lose a piece of meat. Jian Fengqi, you won't, but I might. It wasn't that he hadn't been looked at by so many people at the same time, but they were usually women. It was the first time that so many men were staring at him at the same time. Young Master Jian was really panicking. Little Hachi laughed. I see that many girls are looking at you too. Jian Fengqi's looks were top-notch, and he was suave and elegant. It was normal for girls to like him. Swish! Jian Fengqi pushed open his fan and covered half of his face as he softly said, I'm sorry. Don't talk nonsense. It's not good if others hear you. Little Hachi understood. I'm afraid that little Hong Yu will hear me. But she's been cultivating in seclusion in her room recently. Jian Fengqi's eyebrows twitched. How do you know that she won't suddenly appear here? This was what she was best at, all right. He was busy defending himself and didn't deny the first half of the sentence. Little Hachi pursed her lips and smiled meaningfully. Forget it. Let's go see if there are any more of those two herbs. After saying that, she ran in a certain direction. Jian Fengqi said, Wait, it's not there. He had been here before and was clearly in the opposite direction. Little Hachi blinked. It's here. Digression. 13 guards, gradually recovering lost territory 6:00 p.m. Chapter 23:30. Jian Fengqi pointed in another direction. Wind Thousand Seeds and Devil Snare are usually associated with each other. They grow in damp and cold places. I've been to this mountain a few times. I'm sure I'm not mistaken. Little Hachi said, I didn't say you were mistaken, but didn't you say that there's none over there? Let's go somewhere else. Who knows? Jian Fengqi said helplessly. I've already asked around the entire herb mountain. There's only one place that has it. It's over there. It's not found anywhere else. Little Hachi suddenly became stubborn. But how will we know if we don't go? Jian Fengqi couldn't argue with her, so he had to say, All right then. Let's go over there and take a look. Little Hachi nodded and headed in a certain direction without hesitation. Jian Fengqi frowned slightly. Looking at little Hachi's back, a strange feeling welled up in his heart. Why did he feel that little Hachi didn't just pick a random direction? Instead, she had already made up her mind to go there? This thought flashed through Jian Fengqi's mind, but he quickly suppressed it. He moved his feet and followed her. The herb mountain stretched for hundreds of miles. The area was vast, and the mountain range was continuous. There were all kinds of heavenly materials and earthly treasures. It was easy to get lost in this place if one wasn't careful. But little Hachi seemed to be very familiar with this place. She turned left and right without stopping. After walking for a while, Jin Fengqi finally couldn't help but ask, "Little Hachi, how many times have you been here before? Why are you so familiar with this place?" Little Hachi thought for a moment and said, "Not many times, but the terrain here is simple. I can remember it with a glance. What's so strange about it?" Jin Fengqi, looking at little Hachi's relaxed expression, for a moment, he doubted his brain. Was it not enough? That couldn't be right. He was a celestial physician. With so many complicated prescriptions, he could basically memorize them after reading them a few times. His memory could definitely be considered top-notch. However, after coming to her mountain several times, he often felt a little confused. What was going on with little Hachi? After thinking for a while, Jin Fengqi felt that there was only one possibility. Little Hachi's talent was indeed a little better than his. No matter what, she was now a supreme doctor. It was not surprising that she was better than him in this aspect. Thinking of this, Jin Fengqi felt much better. "We're here." It was right in front. Little Hachi suddenly said. Jin Fengqi followed her line of sight and saw that behind a steep and tall mountain, there was actually a rather short and ordinary hill. The mountain was verdant and lush, and there were many medicinal herbs growing there. However, when Jin Fengqi took a closer look, he did not see Feng Qianzi and mandala. "This place doesn't have it, right?" he said with some uncertainty. Little Hachi did not say anything. In a flash, she arrived at the foot of the hill. A small stream flowed by. The water was so clear that the bottom could be seen. On both sides of the stream, there were clusters of lush green bellflowers that were half the height of a person. Little Hachi's body was light as she jumped over a few stones in the stream. After arriving at the other side, she stretched out her hand and brushed aside a cluster of bellflowers. "Look, isn't this it?" Hearing this, Jin Fengqi was stunned and hurried over. He went over to take a look. Indeed, there were clusters of Feng Qianzi growing under the bellflowers. These Feng Qianzi had no leaves. On the rhizome, there were round and round seeds in a picturesque disorder. When the wind blew, this heavy cluster of seeds swayed with the wind. A few of the seeds were blown off and scattered in the stream, flowing downstream. Because these Feng Qianzi were a light green, they were hidden very well among the bellflowers. Therefore, Jin Fengqi did not see them at first. At the rhizome of the Feng Qianzi, there were thin purple vines wrapped around it. It was mandala. They really do have them. Jin Fengqi was really shocked. More importantly, these Feng Qianzi and mandala seemed to be at least 500 years old. However, he had asked many people before, and they all said that her mountain did not have any more Feng Qianzi and mandala of this age. "What are you waiting for?" Little Hachi raised her chin, indicating that he could take the things away. Jin Fengqi came back to his senses and took a few clusters. Looking at the herbs in his hand, Jin Fengqi could not help but look at little Hachi again with a strange expression. "Little Hachi, this place is so secluded. How did you know?" Little 8 opened his mouth, but the words were stuck in his throat, and he changed his mind. "I already knew." Her words were a little ambiguous, but Jin Fengqi did not hear it. He just thought that she had been here before. After all, with her temperament, she was really capable of doing such a thing. However, this place is so deserted. Jin Fengqi did not delve into it and looked around. There was no one else here except for the two of them. Since her mountain was fully open, people could go in and out freely and basically go anywhere. Basically, people would set foot in every corner of her mountain. However, this place was deserted, as if no one had ever been here. Little Hachi shrugged. "Who cares? Anyway, we found the things, just take them." "How dare you?" A voice full of anger suddenly came from behind the two of them. Jin Fengqi immediately looked back and saw Xu Jing standing not far away, looking down at the two of them. Her carefully drawn eyebrows were tightly knitted, and there was undisguised anger in her eyes. Jin Fengqi elbowed little Hachi. Hey, The person you're looking for is here. Of course, little Hachi had already recognized Shu Jing's voice. Her red lips curled into a perfect arc, and she slowly turned around. Eighth Oracle, what a coincidence. Her voice was still soft and delicate. Those who did not know better would think that she was greeting a good friend that she had not seen in a long time. However, this voice was particularly harsh to Shu Jing's ears. Her face was cold. You are really getting bolder and bolder. How dare you trespass here? Do you know where this is? Little Hachi said honestly. I know. Isn't this her mountain? Wasn't it just open not long ago? Why are we not allowed to come here now? Shu Jing was so angry that her whole body was trembling slightly. This is the private land of the Oracle. How can you step in as you please? Little Hachi and Jian Fengqi immediately understood. So this is your residence. I'm sorry, we really didn't know. Shu Jing was in charge of the affairs of her mountain. She usually spent most of her time here. Even the other oracles did not set foot in this place. However, she never expected that these two people would come here just because she went back to the palace of the illusory god and came back a little late. You want to shirk responsibility just because you said you didn't know? Shu Jing was so angry that she laughed. Little Hachi spread her hands. Eighth Oracle, you said that this is your territory, but you didn't even leave a sign. Who would know? Shu Jing coldly reprimanded. Why not? The barrier outside. Chapter 23:31. Her voice stopped abruptly. She suddenly thought of something, and a look of shock flashed across her eyes. Number 8 turned around to take a look. Barrier? What barrier? There was nothing when we came. As she spoke, she looked at Jian Fengqi. Don't you think so? Jian Fengqi nodded. That's right. We didn't see any barrier. If there was, they wouldn't have come here so casually. Shu Jing looked up in disbelief. The barrier in the distance had indeed dissipated at some point. Shu Jing's heart sank. How could this be? That barrier had existed for tens of thousands of years, and such a situation had never happened before. Little Hachi's eyes flashed as she smiled. Eighth Oracle, how long has it been since you came to her mountain? How could you not know that your barrier has disappeared? Shu Jing pursed her lips tightly and didn't say anything. Then she said, in that case, I'll let you off this time. There won't be a next time. After saying that, she turned around and was about to leave. She seemed to be in a hurry, as if she was in a hurry to do something. Little Hachi suddenly stepped forward and chuckled. Eighth Oracle, wait. Shu Jing turned around impatiently. What else do you have to say? If she wasn't in a hurry to confirm something, she wouldn't have let these two off so easily. Little Hachi said, it's not a big deal. Actually, it's not a big deal. I just have a few words that I want to talk to you about. Shu Jing frowned. What kind of medicine was this little 8 selling in his gourd? I don't have time to listen to your useless words. Shu Jing retracted her gaze and was about to leave. However, little Hachi's words made her stop in her tracks. Eighth Oracle, I heard that you have been in charge of her mountain for tens of thousands of years. Logically speaking, you should know every blade of grass, every tree, every mountain, and every river here the best. However, Eighth Oracle, you don't seem to be doing a very good job. These words completely ignited the long-suppressed anger in Shu Jing's heart. She abruptly turned around and questioned sternly, what did you say? The Herb Mountain was what she cared about the most. In the past few years, she had been trying to seize more rights, wanting to completely take Herb Mountain as her own, and so on. It was not difficult to see this point. Therefore, she would never allow anyone to question her in this aspect. Previously, it was the god monarch who had made a move. She was wary of him, so she obediently handed over all her authority. No matter how unwilling she was, she would never dare to go against that person. However, little Hachi was different. Who do you think you are? How dare you talk nonsense in front of me? Shu Jing was so angry that he didn't show any mercy with his words. Little Hachi was not annoyed. She raised her eyebrows and said, if the 8th divine emissary had cared about Herb Mountain in the slightest, then Herb Mountain wouldn't have ended up like this. Don't tell me you don't know that. Wind seeds and devil snare that are more than 100 years old are all gone? Of course, Shu Jing knew. After all, she had kept a close watch on every single herb on her mountain. However, she didn't care. So what? Then what? About? Little Hatchie repeated her words. The smile on her lips deepened, but a layer of frost gradually gathered in her eyes. She sneered. Heavenly treasures are extremely precious, but it is precisely because of this that they have to be taken care of carefully. In the end, you harvested all of them and didn't leave anything behind? Eighth Oracle, even I understand this simple logic. How can you not understand it? The only explanation was that Shu Jing didn't think about taking good care of her mountain at all. She just wanted to seize as many benefits as possible. Anyway, she definitely didn't lack herbs in her hands. As for the rest, she couldn't be bothered to care. Shu Jing was so angry that she laughed. She took a step forward and looked at little Hatchie with contempt and ridicule. Since her mountain is guarded by me, then it's not up to others to worry about these things. Whether her mountain is good or bad, what does it have to do with you? Little Hatchie's expression gradually turned cold. I know that you've recently broken through to Supreme Doctor and that it's time to show off. However, this illusory god palace doesn't lack a Supreme Doctor like you. Besides, you don't have a bloodline totem. Seeing the change in little Hatchie's expression, Shu Jing was very pleased. During this period of time, she really had enough of all kinds of anger. She had long suppressed a stomach full of anger. Now that little Hatchie had bumped into the muzzle of the gun, she naturally wouldn't let it go so easily. You and your arrogant and despotic master are just as annoying as you. You're just born lowly, slap. Before Shu Jing could finish her words, her face was fiercely slapped. The loud and clear sound of the slap rang out, instantly freezing the surrounding space. Little Hatchie had used all her strength in this slap, directly slapping Shu Jing's face to the side. It wasn't that she was weaker than little Hatchie, but she really didn't expect little Hatchie to suddenly make a move. Ever since Shu Jing became a god's messenger, she had always been high and mighty. Why had she ever been slapped in the face like this? She covered the numb and painful half of her face and looked at little Hatchie in shock and anger. You. Without thinking, she raised her hand to counterattack, slapping towards little Hatchie's face. Little Adie clamped her wrist in a death grip. That pair of beautiful eyes, which had always been enchanting and seductive, was now filled with a biting cold. You dare to scold, Master. I think you don't want to live anymore. Jian Fengqi, who was watching from the side, was also stunned for a while. My great aunt, you're really fighting with a god's messenger? Just as he was about to persuade her, he suddenly felt that something was wrong with the surroundings. He lowered his head to take a look. Ripples suddenly appeared on the surface of the stream. The surrounding grass and trees swayed without wind. An indistinct and powerful aura was gradually revealed. Chapter 23:32. Shock flashed across Jian Fengqi's eyes. This pressure seemed to be coming from little Hatchie, but wasn't she the exalted god? How could she cause such a big commotion? However, Shu Jing was still angry and did not realize that something was wrong. She clamped down on little Eight's wrist and raised her hand to hit him again. Chi! The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came, and a folding fan hit her wrist hard. Shu Jing felt the pain and subconsciously let go of her hand. She looked at Jian Fengqi angrily. You! Jian Fengqi hurriedly said. Oh, I'm so sorry. I wanted to stop little Hatchie, but I didn't expect to hit you. Eighth Oracle, are you okay? Shu Jing was furious. Jian Fengqi was clearly helping little Hatchie. Good, good. You two are really going to rebel. Little Hatchie stared at Shu Jing. Her red lips curled into an enchanting smile, but her eyes were extremely cold. Oh, who did you say was going to rebel? Her voice was as soft and sweet as ever, but her tone now carried an indescribable majesty. Shu Jing's heart trembled as she subconsciously exchanged glances with little Eight. She did not know why, But when she met those cold and smiling eyes, she suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness. Those eyes seemed to be able to see through everything straight to the deepest part of her heart. The bellflowers swayed, the stream flowed faster, and the waves surged. Little Hachi said, "Shu Jing, this mountain. You are not qualified to be in charge." Shu Jing was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She screamed, "If I'm not qualified, do you think you are?" Little Hachi did not say anything and just stared at her. The letter hanging from her waist began to tremble slightly. The words on it were rich and bright, as if they were about to burst out of it. "It seems that if I don't teach you a lesson today, you won't realize what you've done wrong." As soon as she finished speaking, Shu Jing's aura suddenly surged. However, Little Hachi's face did not show any signs of panic. Instead, the corners of her lips curled into a mocking smile. Jian Fengqi glanced at her, and the corner of her eyes twitched. How could Little Hachi still smile at a time like this? She was really not afraid of offending Shu Jing. Jian Fengqi's figure moved, and he came to Xiao Ba's side. He pulled her behind him and said softly, he whispered, "Little Hachi, you're too bold." With this slap, how would Shu Jing take revenge on her? How would she continue living in the future? Little Eight, on the other hand, brushed his hair behind his back and smiled enchantingly. What's there to be afraid of? I like to see how she's going to teach me a lesson. Jian Fengqi was about to say something when he suddenly saw a barrier slowly appear not far away. The barrier was pale green and had some strange patterns engraved on it. After taking a closer look, Jian Fengqi realized that it was a Xian formation. However, this Xian formation was filled with countless patterns and lines. It was extremely complicated. If one looked at it for a long time, it would give them a headache. Jian Fengqi retracted his gaze. He was still a little shocked. Is that the barrier that the 8th divine envoy mentioned before? Little Eight turned around to take a look as a smile appeared in his eyes. Jian Fengqi did not see her current expression. He was worried, but he still looked at Shu Jing. If it was a divine envoy, the two of them would definitely not be able to defeat him. They had to think of a way. However, at this moment, the power surging from Shu Jing's body suddenly dissipated into the surroundings. The power that he had just gathered dissipated silently, just like that. Shu Jing was shocked. He widened his eyes in disbelief and looked at his hands. The pressure that he had accumulated in his palms was also annihilated at this moment. She panicked for a moment. Then, she tried to mobilize the power around her body again. However, before she could do anything, the power dissipated again. Shu Jing's heart sank. Then, she suddenly thought of something and raised her head to look ahead. The barrier had reappeared at some point. The power that had dissipated from her body was also quietly surging toward the barrier. It was the barrier that was forcibly depriving her of power. Shu Jing felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured over her head. An indescribable chill suddenly surged from the bottom of her heart, causing her whole body to tremble slightly. This barrier, Jian Fengqi saw that her expression was not right. He also looked back and was shocked on the spot. Wasn't this the 8th divine envoy's barrier? Why did he suddenly turn around and attack her? Shu Jing suddenly turned around and left quickly. Her speed was very fast. Her footsteps were hurried, and there was a trace of panic and embarrassment in her back. Jian Fengqi blinked. She's leaving just like that. Didn't she say that she was going to teach them a lesson? And Little Hachi's slap. Was she going to take it for nothing? This 8th divine envoy is really interesting, Jian Fengqi said. He looked at Little Hachi and asked with some concern. Although she's gone, with her personality, she definitely won't let today's matter go. Little Hachi smiled. What are you afraid of? She's like a clay Buddha crossing a river now. She can't even protect herself. How can she have the time to care about us? What do you mean? Look at that barrier. She's in charge of looking after the mountain, but she can't even control this. Little Hachi sneered. I thought she was very powerful. It turns out that she's just strong on the outside, but weak on the inside. What a waste of my feelings. Jian Fengqi, Little Hachi. Don't you think You're getting more and more arrogant. How many people dare to scold the 8th divine envoy like this? Yes, she didn't just scold her, she even slapped her. Jian Fengqi felt that Xu Jing had probably never been bullied like this before. Just look at her expression just now. It was as if she couldn't wait to tear little Hachi apart. Little Hachi blinked her beautiful eyes. Her thick and curly eyelashes trembled slightly like small fans. She looked around and said modestly, "I didn't." Jian Fengqi trembled all over. He cupped his fist and took a step back. "My dear lady, let's talk things over." His little heart was still trembling when he thought of little Hachi's slap just now. Little Hachi snorted softly and walked back while twisting her waist. Jian Fengqi thought for a while and followed her. He asked with some concern, "By the way, I'm afraid that Xu Jing will really hold a grudge against us this time." Little Hachi yawned carelessly. "She's always been like this. What's there to worry about? What if she comes back again?" Little Hachi waved her hand. "Then I'll be merciful and give her another slap. 2 slaps will do. Any more and it would hurt my hand." Little Hachi looked at her hand with heartache. "Look at how thick-skinned she is. My fingernails were almost scratched." Jian Fengqi. As the two talked, they arrived in front of the barrier. Jian Fengqi suddenly thought of something. He looked back and saw that the surrounding vegetation gradually stopped swaying. The waves in the stream also gradually calmed down. Chapter 23:33. Just like that, everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. He frowned and glanced at little Hachi subconsciously. He wanted to ask something, but he didn't know where to start. What should he ask? Should he ask if the commotion just now had anything to do with little Hachi? And the sudden appearance of this barrier. Jian Fengqi shook his head and dispelled that ridiculous thought. Xu Jing had said that this barrier had been here for a long time. How could it have anything to do with little Hachi? At this moment, little Hachi had already arrived in front of the barrier. When he was still 10 steps away from the barrier suddenly dissipated. Little Hachi waved at Jian Fengqi. "What are you waiting for? Let's go." Jian Fengqi was stunned for a moment, but then he followed her. It was probably a coincidence. After all, when they arrived, the barrier had also mysteriously disappeared. "Little Hachi, why do you think that barrier is not controlled by the 8th Oracle? Isn't this her territory?" Little Hachi smiled. "How would I know?" Xu Jing hurried back to the palace of the illusory god. She wanted to look for the first oracle, but halfway there, she remembered that she had asked for an audience several times before, and, without exception, she had been rejected. If she went again this time, the result would probably be the same. Xu Jing gritted her teeth, turned around, and walked toward the residence of the second oracle. Just as she arrived at the door, before she could knock, she bumped into Yu Qian, who was walking from the other side. It seemed that he had just returned. Second oracle. Seeing Yu Qian, Xu Jing hurried forward. "I have something important to report." Yu Qian was in a gloomy mood. He didn't want to pay attention to her, but when he heard her, he looked up at her and saw that her expression was not right. So he stopped. "What's wrong?" Just as Xu Jing was about to speak, her gaze suddenly froze as she saw a bloody wound on Yu Qian's hand. It looked like he had been bitten by something. Second oracle. The wound on your hand. Yu Qian's face darkened. "I was bitten by a beast on the Divine Beast Mountain." Xu Jing was shocked. "What?" "On the Divine Beast Mountain, there were hundreds of divine beasts. They were all taken care of by the second divine envoy. Normally, these divine beasts were especially respectful towards him. Why did they suddenly go crazy this time?" Yu Qian gritted his teeth. In fact, he hadn't been there for a long time. Today, he suddenly thought of this matter and wanted to go and take a look. Who would have thought that one of them would suddenly attack and bite him? Even though he had already killed it on the spot, the wound was still left behind. Furthermore, because the bastard's teeth were poisonous, he had even specially used medicine. Therefore, when he saw Xu Jing at this moment, his mood was at its worst. "These bastards are getting more and more impudent. How dare they bite you?" Xu Jing's words made Yu Qian even more irritated. He asked coldly, "Okay, it's already over. There's no need to mention it again. But you said that you have something to report. What happened?" A trace of difficulty flashed across Shu Jing's face. She then said, "Don't worry. There seems to be something wrong with the barrier on the herb mountain." Then she told Yu Qian what had happened. However, she deliberately skipped the part where little Hachi had attacked. It wasn't that she wanted to cover up for little Hachi, but as a divine envoy, she had been slapped by someone who had just arrived at the illusory god palace and didn't even have a bloodline totem. This matter was too embarrassing in itself. If this matter were spread, she would really lose her face. Anyway, she had plenty of ways to get back at him. After speaking, Yu Qian didn't speak for a long time. Shu Jing was a little nervous. "Second divine envoy, what happened to your face?" Yu Qian suddenly asked. Shu Jing was startled. Then, she suddenly realized something. There was still a palm print on her face. She had actually forgotten about this matter. Just now, she had rushed over in a hurry. Her mind was only thinking about the barrier. How could she remember this? In the end, Yu Qian saw it. Shu Jing lowered her head in embarrassment. Yu Qian asked, "Was this slapped by little Hachi?" Shu Jing braced herself and nodded. Yu Qian suddenly laughed. "Shu Jing, you are the 8th divine envoy. How could you be slapped like this? What are you doing?" Seeing that Yu Qian was angry, Shu Jing's heart skipped a beat. It's because she attacked too suddenly. I didn't check, and Yu Qian looked at her coldly. Shu Jing's remaining words were suddenly stuck in her throat. Her face was green and white. After a long time, she finally said, "Shu Jing is incompetent. You are indeed incompetent." Yu Qian didn't give Shu Jing any face. "You are the divine envoy. How could you be slapped by such a person? If this news gets out, the entire palace of the illusory god will be humiliated because of you." Shu Jing lowered her head and didn't dare to speak. "How did you deal with that, little Hachi?" She paused and lowered her head even more. Not yet. At that time, the barrier suddenly, so you were slapped, but you didn't do anything in the end. You just came back like this?" Yu Qian's eyes were opened. This was simply throwing the face of the divine envoy to the ground and letting others trample on it at will. Sensing his anger, Shu Jing clenched her fists but didn't dare to say anything. At this moment, it was useless to say anything. She couldn't pretend that what had happened didn't happen. Even if she went back and killed that little Hachi now, she had already suffered this slap. This humiliation was something that would never be erased. Yu Qian took a deep breath. "But that's not the most important thing. Shu Jing, after so long, you still haven't taken down that barrier?" Shu Jing's face turned pale, and her legs went weak. "In the past, you tried to control Herb Mountain and did a lot of dirty tricks in private. I didn't care much about it, because in my opinion, it's not a bad thing for you to be ambitious. At the very least, it can help you solve the problem of the barrier more quickly and smoothly. But now, you used public power for private purposes. Not only did you alarm the Emperor, but you didn't make any progress on the problem of the barrier at all. Shu Jing, you disappoint me too much." Shu Jing almost couldn't bear the series of accusations and reprimands. After a while, she finally managed to find her voice. "Second divine envoy, that barrier, I try my best, but it's not like you don't know how difficult it is to deal with." Yu Qian looked down at her with indifferent eyes. "Of course I know that, but I've given you more than 10,000 years, and you still haven't solved it. This is no longer something that can be summarized with the word incompetent." Shu Jing's nails dug deep in her palms, and she felt a sharp pain. However, she was almost numb at this time and couldn't care less about this. That barrier wasn't set up by me in the first place. It's so difficult to control it. Chapter 2334. On the other side, little Hachi and Jian Fengqi returned to their residence. As soon as they entered the courtyard, they saw a familiar figure. It was Yanqing. Seeing little Hachi and Jian Fengqi come in together, Yanqing stopped and took the initiative to speak for the first time. "You went to the Herb Mountain?" Little Hachi walked over with a smile. "Brother Yanqing, how did you know?" Qing paused and pursed his lips. Little Hatchie saw his reaction and was very happy. This person really couldn't stand a little teasing, but it happened that this kind of person was the most interesting to tease. Little Hatchie stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. "Brother Qing, you seem to be very concerned about me?" Qing looked down and glanced at her hand. He saw that half of the gorgeous nail polish on one of her fingers had fallen off. He narrowed his eyes. "Did you fight with someone?" Little Hatchie was surprised. "How did you know?" Following Qing's gaze, she realized and couldn't help but click her tongue. "Your eyes are really sharp." "Alas, it's nothing. There was a woman who was annoying, so I gave her a slap." His words were really casual and carefree. Fengqi said faintly. "She slapped the 8th oracle, Shu Jing." Little Hatchie pursed her red lips. "Who told her to scold Master first? Giving her a slap is already a light punishment." Listening to the conversation between the two, Qing quickly understood what happened. Then he frowned slightly. "She didn't fight back and let you go just like that?" Little Hatchie laughed. "She can't even take care of herself. How can she have time to care about me?" With that, she turned and walked towards her room. "I'm tired today, so I'll rest first. Don't disturb me." Before she finished speaking, she had already entered the room. Qing's eyes moved slightly. After a while, he looked away and was about to leave. "Hey, Lord Qing!" Fengqi shouted. Qing looked back at him with cold eyes. "What's the matter?" Fengqi's eyelids twitched. "What?" Little Hatchie slapped the 8th oracle. "Even if you're an iceberg, please give some reaction. Why doesn't everyone seem to care about this matter?" He couldn't help coughing and reminded him. Little 8 really slapped the 8th divine emissary in the face. "I heard it." Qing was a man of few words, and there was no change in his expression. Fengqi choked and pounded his chest twice. Forget it. He couldn't afford to offend them. They're all really Hatchies. Since everyone didn't care, why was he worried? At this moment, a voice suddenly came from another room. "Dong!" It sounded like something had fallen over. Fengqi looked over and saw that it was Mu Hongyu's room. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over and knocked on the door. "Hongyu, what's wrong?" In the room, Mu Hongyu grimaced in pain as she stood up from the floor. Then, she held the chair up. "I'm fine." Hearing that her voice was full of energy, Fengqi was relieved. He wanted to go in and take a look, but he gave up in the end. He knew that Mu Hongyu had been cultivating recently, trying to break through to the Mahayana realm as soon as possible. She would encounter some troubles and problems. It was a simple matter. After thinking about it, Fengqi gave a few more words of advice before turning to leave. When he looked back, Qing was already gone. "You're really not worried?" Fengqi shook his head. Hearing the footsteps outside leave, Mu Hongyu hissed and gently rubbed her shoulders. The Mahayana realm was really hard to cultivate. She tried all kinds of methods, but she still couldn't break through. Instead, she would often run to other places for no reason. Fortunately, she hadn't gone to any strange places so far. But in this illusory god palace, she had to be extra careful. She indignantly took out the map that Chu Luiwe had left behind and started studying it. Phoenix Cry Mountain. The mountain breeze blew, and a tender green two-tian baby was swaying gently. Dumpling sat alone on the side, cultivating. Below her, there was a layer of reddish-gold flames burning silently. The surrounding energy quickly surged into her body. The aura surged and the pressure was prominent. After opening her 7th meridian, her cultivation speed had obviously increased a lot. After all, even Izhao had only opened his 7th meridian. Now that she had reached such a level before officially becoming an adult, it was really heaven-defying. After a long time, Dumpling finally stopped and slowly opened her eyes. Those big black grape-like eyes seemed to become clearer and brighter than before, and a bright light flashed through them. Sigh. So boring. Dumpling let out a long breath. Her small hands were holding her cheeks, and her chubby little face was full of worry. Although it was comfortable to stay here, it was really lonely to be alone. The key was that Yu wasn't in the illusory god palace, and she couldn't find anyone to talk to. Dumpling sighed again. Eh, eh. She suddenly sensed something and quickly turned her head to take a look. There was nothing behind him, nothing at all. Dumpling blinked. Strange. She clearly felt a pair of eyes looking at her just now. Dumpling's big eyes turned and retracted her gaze. She reached out and gently touched the 2 Tian baby's leaves. It grew very quickly here, and now it had 5 leaves. Verdant and tender, full of vitality. As if affected by it, Phoenix Cry Mountain seemed to be more lively than before. At the foot of the mountain, some green sprouts had already grown on the originally bare ground. Although it had just grown out not long ago, it looked exceptionally pleasing to the eye. When will I be able to open my 9th meridian? Dumpling muttered softly. In the past, she didn't care much about this matter. Even if she knew that she had the purest bloodline, she didn't think too much about it. But now it was different. Only by opening the 9th meridian could he save Grandpa Chief. Moreover, only by being strong enough could he protect Ayu. As she spoke, she suddenly struck out with a backhand attack. A cluster of reddish-gold flames flew out. Come out! Chapter 23:35. This time, she hit nothing. No one appeared. Not even a trace was left behind. It seemed like there was really nothing. Tuanzi didn't believe it. She stood up and ran over. Then she searched carefully in all directions. What, running so fast? She could not help but mutter under her breath. She was sure that someone was watching her in the dark. Unfortunately, she could not find out who it was. She put one hand on her waist and shouted at the empty void in front of her. If you have the ability to secretly watch me, then don't be afraid to come out. No one responded. Dumpling pouted angrily. I'm going to be angry. Still, no one responded. Tuanzi was so angry that she turned around to leave and sat down again. Whoosh, as if sensing her anger, the energy of heaven and earth around Feng Ming Mountain suddenly surged quickly. In addition, the 2 Tian baby was also shaking, making the movement even louder. Puff! A reddish-gold flame suddenly burned not far in front of Dumpling. Puff puff! With the first one taking the lead, the rest naturally flowed smoothly. A few more bursts of flames erupted from the mountain rocks. Soon, these energies all rushed into Dumpling's body. They were purer and faster than the previous ones. Dumpling's entire body was quickly wrapped in flames, and her aura was constantly rising. She did not believe that when she was more powerful, she would definitely be able to catch the other party. God-slaying mound. Dark clouds gathered, and the sky was dark. Under the gloomy sky, the space distorted and turned into vortexes, crazily accumulating energy. And Chu Luiwe was standing in the middle of these countless vortexes. She closed her eyes, and her slender white fingers plucked the void. The sound of the zither rose into the air, and in the depths of this tomb, there was also a guqin music which was constantly responding to her. Every note, every tone was perfectly matched. Chu Yue's blood rushed in her body, as if something was about to break out. At a certain moment, the last guqin music finally fell, hovering in the empty and boundless wilderness for a long time. She suddenly opened her eyes. Then she waved her hand gently, and the countless vortexes above fell down one after another. One by one, they entered the stone beside Chu Yue's feet. Countless holes were torn in the void, and for a time, violent spatial turbulence surged. At first glance, the surrounding space was like a soft and fragile piece of cloth that could be easily torn apart. However, these did not pose any threat to Chu Luiwe. Those terrifying auras only lingered in their own positions and did not approach Chu Luiwe at all. Of course, it was very likely that this was because the more terrifying part of the spatial energy was actually under her control. Chu Luiwe raised his hand. A stone at his feet flew over and entered his interspatial ring. Then the second piece, the third piece, Chu Luiyue was a little worried that the interspatial ring would not be able to withstand the power and pressure of these stones, but he was surprised to find that his worry was completely unnecessary. The interspatial ring didn't seem to be affected at all when the last stone entered it. It was silent, tolerant, and powerful. She stared at the interspatial ring, and then said to Rongxiu, "This ring is really much more powerful than I expected." This ring was given to her by Rongxiu, and it was the most precious treasure of the Yuntian Tower. Rongxiu smiled and said, "Yes, of course, anything given to you is the best." Chu Luiyue's heart warmed. Then, she raised her eyes and looked forward with a slightly serious expression. Rongxiu asked, "Do you have a whereabouts of the zither score?" Chu Luiyue nodded and then shook her head. "Actually, if I'm not wrong, that zither score should already be in my hands." Rongxiu raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment, as if she was thinking about how to explain. Every note of the last zither score is hidden in the void. So just now, when I used the 2 zither scores to summon the third one, such a scene appeared. The void was constantly twisting and collapsing, and vortexes appeared one after another. The third zither score was successfully summoned, but because it had completely merged with the void and was cut into 3,000 pieces, in the end, there was not a single complete piece. Of course, to be precise, there were the broken tombstones. Now, they were all lying in Chu Luiyue's interspatial ring. In this way, it was not wrong to say that she had already obtained the zither score. It was just that she probably still needed to completely piece it together and reassemble it. No wonder Senior Jing didn't notice the existence of the last zither score back then. Chu Luiyue rubbed between her eyebrows, feeling a headache. She was the last one to realize this. In other words, the last zither score hasn't merged with the first 2. Rongxiu said. Chu Luiyue nodded. "I guess I need to wait until I can completely control these stones." However, those represented the power of 3,000 spatial forces. Even though she already had a close connection with these spatial powers, how could it be so easy to completely control them? Even the stones she obtained from the high god tombs were occasionally not obedient, let alone these stones. Rongxiu nodded, his thin lips curling slightly. "But the thing is already in your hands. Completely merging is only a matter of time." "Yes." Chu Luiyue let out a long sigh of relief. As long as she reassembled the last zither score and merged it with the first 2, all the problems would be solved. Since this matter is over, we should return to the illusory god palace as soon as possible. I wonder how the 2 divine envoys are doing now. As she spoke, she saw Rongxiu raise his chin. "I'm afraid we'll have to wait." Chu Luiyue followed his gaze and raised her eyebrows. Lu Feng and Qi Han were still in the same place, enveloped in divine territory, constantly devouring the power around them, and the aura around them was several times stronger than before. Chu Luiyue's eyes flashed as she murmured softly, "Are they about to break through to Venerable God? Digression. I'm going out today. I don't want everyone to wait, so I'll owe you one. Moi." Chapter 23:36. As soon as she said that, Lu Feng's aura surged. Almost at the same time, a heavy pressure spread out from Qi Han's body. The 2 of them had both broken through to God. Chu Luiyue looked up at the sky. In the dark sky, the spatial rifts that had been torn apart were repairing themselves. But there was no Tianlei. Generally speaking, when one broke through to God, it would cause a huge commotion with the Tianlei. Those with greater talent and strength would even attract a golden Tianlei. Chu Luiyue had been like that. But now, perhaps because the lightning pool in the illusory god palace was sealed, there was no Tianlei at all. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Although the 2 of them had successfully broken through to God, it felt like something was missing. After a while, the surging aura around Lu Feng and Qi Han finally calmed down. The 2 of them stood up. "Master!" Chu Luiyue's lips curved into a smile. "You 2 are really efficient." The threshold to God was not so easy to cross. For example, little Hachi showed no signs of breaking through until now. Not to mention that the energy here was chaotic. It was rare to be able to break through under such circumstances. You two should follow us back to the illusory God Palace later, Chu Luiwe said thoughtfully. When the lightning pool opens, we can temper our divine bodies. The two of them answered in unison. Chu Luiwe looked ahead. The black wall stood in the distance. After such a big commotion, Senior Ah Jing did not respond. Chu Luiwe murmured strangely. She wanted to go and take a look, but after careful consideration, Chu Luiwe dismissed the idea. Senior Ah Jing was powerful. If he did not plan to come out, he must have his own considerations. She did not need to disturb him. Chu Luiwe made up her mind. Back to the illusory God Palace. After making the decision, the group quickly returned. Since Lu Feng and Qi Han had broken through to the God Realm, they moved very quickly. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the shore of the illusionary God Ocean. Unlike the bustling atmosphere in the past, this place was completely empty. At a glance, there was only a tall man standing with his hands clasped behind his back. This back view looked somewhat familiar, as if sensing their movements, that person turned around. Senior Mao Zhan? It was indeed him. Chu Lu was very surprised. Why did you suddenly come? Mao Zhan stroked his beard. This old man has already laid down heavy guards at Divine Dragon Island. I thought that I should come here to take a look, so I came over. Now, all the experts of the Divine Ruins world were heading over here. There was no need for him to say anything. With Mao Zhan around, Chu Luiwe immediately felt more at ease. She nodded her head and looked around her again. Why are you alone here? Mao Zhan said. When this old man came, there wasn't anyone here. I was just about to go up when I bumped into you guys. Hey, where did you guys go? Chu Luiwe smiled. Because of some matters, I returned to the God-slaying tomb. Mao Zhan was a little surprised. Didn't you say that the seventh divine envoy guards the heavenly gate very strictly? Why? This doesn't seem to be the first time she came out, right? Is the seventh divine envoy so easy to talk to? Chu Luiwe smiled and said, yes. Yeah, he didn't seem too happy. But so what? Mao Zhan was speechless. Looking at Chu Luiwe's nonchalant expression, Mao Zhan deeply felt that her question was really not up to standard. I should have known that this girl wouldn't be willing to reason under such circumstances. What a coincidence that we arrived at the same time. Mao Zhan chuckled. Even though this old man has long heard of the illusionary God Palace, this is my first time here. Chu Luiwe had briefly chatted with him before. The great phoenix dragon's ancestor, Mao Lin, also came from the illusionary God Palace. But later, these two ancient divine beasts left the illusionary God Palace. Now, Chu Luiwe already knew some of the rumors back then, so he guessed that the departure of the great phoenix dragon and the crimson gold heavenly phoenix should also be related to that incident. But the specific truth was hard to say. Chu Luiwe raised his hand. Senior Mao Zhan, please. Passing over the illusionary God Sea again, Chu Luiwe could vaguely feel that he seemed to be able to vaguely feel that several spatial forces below were intertwining with each other. In the silence, undercurrents were surging. Chu Luiwe glanced down and frowned slightly. Rongxiu noticed her movements and looked over. You are, Chu Luiwe said softly. This illusionary God Sea is really more powerful than expected. She had already faintly sensed that what she saw last time was actually just the tip of the iceberg. Diwu Zhangzhou was trapped in the deepest part of this sea. If they wanted to rescue him, they indeed needed to make sufficient preparations. Then, they successfully reached the Silver Bridge and walked toward the Divine Gate. Just as they arrived in front of the Divine Gate, the barrier opened automatically. Chu Luiwe was stunned. This, the so-called Divine Gate, doesn't seem that difficult to enter. As Mao Zhan spoke, he stepped into it. Miao! Chu Luiwe was about to stop him when he saw that Mao Zhan had already walked in. Then, nothing happened. Everything was as usual. Chu Luiwe waited for a while, but the seventh divine envoy didn't appear. Mao Zhan turned around and waved at them. What are you waiting for? Come here. Rongxiu held Chu Luiwe's hand and walked in. Lu Feng and Chi Han followed closely behind. After entering, Chu Luiyue looked around. This place was empty as usual, but there seemed to be a slight difference. It seemed to be more deserted than before. The seventh god is so busy that he doesn't even guard the divine gate. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes slightly. Jin Yinlai wasn't such a person. Besides, even if he really had something to do, he could have asked the other divine envoys for help. But there was nothing. Perhaps he was delayed by something? Mao Zhen asked, what could be more important than guarding the divine gate? This was the only entrance to the illusory god palace. Its importance was needless to say. Swoosh! A sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came from afar. Chu Luiyue and the others looked up and saw a figure passing through the air, heading in the direction of the illusory god palace. Wait, the illusory god palace. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat as he stared at that person. He didn't turn in any other direction. He was heading straight for the illusory god palace. Soon, another person was heading in another direction. He wasn't slow, as if he was in a hurry to do something. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. The illusory god palace was sacred and honorable. Most people here could only look at it from afar. What was going on this time? Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment and said, let's go and take a look. Chapter 23:37. They followed the star path to the palace of the illusory god. The deeper they went, the stranger Chu Luiyue felt. In the past, both sides of the star path were quite lively, but now it was deserted. It was really strange. Did the people here all go to the palace of the illusory god? Chu Luiyue murmured doubtfully. As soon as he finished speaking, he bumped into an acquaintance. Senior Xiao Ran. Seeing that familiar figure, Chu Luiyue immediately spoke. Xiao Ran had his arms crossed and was walking over lazily. When he heard this voice, he immediately turned around. He smiled when he saw Chu Luiyue. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Mao Zhen and the rest from the corner of his eyes. He had seen Rong Xiu before, but the other three were extremely unfamiliar. His heart skipped a beat, and he guessed something. These few came with you this time? Chu Luiyue nodded and then introduced them. Senior Xiao Ran. This is Senior Mao Zhen. Hearing this name, Xiao Ran's expression changed slightly. Mao, Great Phoenix Dragon Clan? Senior Mao Zhen is the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan. Chu Luiyue explained. Xiao Ran thought to himself. He felt that this person looked unusual just now, but her identity still surprised him. So it's clan leader Mao Zhen. Xiao Ran smiled and cupped his hands, but his heart was filled with emotions. This little girl was a bit too powerful. First, she made an agreement with the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Now, it seemed that she had a good relationship with the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan. It was difficult for ordinary people to even see an ancient divine beast, but she had a good relationship with both clans at the same time. Except for the fact that she didn't have a bloodline totem, everything else was really heaven-defying. As he spoke, he looked at Lu Feng and Chi Han behind him. These two, they looked very young, but they were already gods. Chu Luiyue glanced back. The two immediately bowed. Lu Feng, Chi Han, greet Senior Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran was very surprised. You? These two are also your subordinates? Chu Luiyue nodded. Xiao Ran was speechless. It was one thing for her to become a god at such a young age, but her subordinates were all so powerful as well. How could he let others live? Were these people really ordinary people from the Divine Ruins world who didn't even have a bloodline totem? Xiao Ran felt a sense of crisis and defeat. Chu Luiyue asked, Senior Xiao Ran, where are you going? I just saw that some people seem to be heading towards the palace of the illusory god. Xiao Ran said, Of course I'm going to watch the show. Oh, that's right. You guys just came back, so you don't know yet. The Divine Lord is going to help the sixth divine envoy reconstruct his divine body. This kind of thing was hard to come by in 10,000 years, so everyone passed by. It was just a short sentence, but it contained too much information. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled violently. Divine Master, if you didn't guess wrong, wasn't that the Lord of the illusory God Palace? The Divine Master is coming out? No, Xiaoran said. The Divine Master is in charge of the palace of the illusory God and is extremely sacred. Other than the Divine Envoys, no one can see him. Besides, the Divine Master is extremely powerful. Even if he doesn't come out of the palace of the illusory God, it's easy for him to rebuild the divine body of the sixth divine envoy. Chu Luiyue pursed his lips and felt a bit disappointed. But when he thought about it carefully, it was actually normal. Even the palace of the illusory God was so difficult to enter, so the Divine Master was naturally even more difficult to meet. But if this was a small matter for the Divine Master, he could have done it in private. Why did he have to make it public? And the sixth divine envoy, the divine envoys are all powerful people. Why doesn't the sixth divine envoy have a divine body? Of course it's because Xiaoran paused, looked around, and then lowered his voice. The sixth divine envoy used to have a divine body, but I heard that he went out of the palace of the illusory God a while ago, and when he came back, his divine body was already damaged. It wasn't a big deal. With the sixth divine envoy's identity and strength, he could go to the lightning pool and borrow the power of Tianlei to rebuild his divine body. But isn't the lightning pool sealed? So now we can only ask the Divine Master for help. What happened to the sixth divine envoy that even his divine body was damaged? Chu Luiyue was very surprised. According to the ranking, the sixth divine envoy's status was slightly higher than the seventh divine envoy. How did he end up in such a state? Who knows? Xiaoran shook his head. Let's go and take a look. It's rare to see the Divine Master personally take action. Perhaps it would be beneficial to improve your cultivation after seeing it. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up. Rebuilding a divine body, she was very experienced in this matter. But Xiaoran was right. After all, it was the Divine Master's action. The significance of it was incomparable. Okay, the group was about to go and take a look when they suddenly heard footsteps from the side. Chu Luiyue turned his head and saw that it was Yin Qing. Your Highness. He came in front of Rong Xiao and bowed respectfully. Then, he handed over a letter with both hands. An urgent letter from the Yuntian Tower. Please take a look. Rong Xiao raised his hands to take it, opened it, and glanced at it with narrowed eyes. A faint chill surged out his body. Chu Luiyue asked curiously, Rong Xiao, what's wrong? Rong Xiao put the letter away. There's a small problem. For Rong Xiao to say this, it definitely isn't a small trouble. Chu Luiyue said, Then, do you want to go back and take a look? Rong Xiao shook his head. I'll go back to my place first. I'll find you after I've taken care of the matter. Chu Luiyue nodded. There's no hurry. The Yuntian Tower is more important. As for the palace of the illusory God, she just wanted to see what was going on. Rong Xiao nodded and took Yin Qing in another direction. Chu Luiyue also looked away. Let's go. Let's go to the palace of the illusory God. Of course, they couldn't enter the palace of the illusory God. They could only stand outside the door. When Chu Luiyue and the others arrived, hundreds of people had already gathered outside the palace of the illusory God. The place was bustling with noise and excitement. At this time, they were all looking for something. Chu Luiyue took a closer look and saw that there was a bronze mirror in front of the door, which was quietly floating in midair. A figure gradually appeared in the bronze mirror. Is that the sixth oracle? That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.